The hall was littered with broken pieces of training dummies, some with their hands flung to the far corners, while others had their necks sliced clean off. The atmosphere felt unusually heavy, not just from the destruction, but because the gravity here was far greater than outside. Every breath felt slightly harder to take. Every step weighed more than it should. Standing in the middle of the special training ground, Alicia was breathing heavily, her shoulders rising and falling with each ragged breath. Sweat rolled down her temples, tracing the curve of her jaw before dripping onto the worn floor beneath her feet. It's not enough. Her power was still lacking. It was nowhere near the level where she could at least stand with Ash. And to be honest, the goal she was chasing was almost impossible to reach. Ash, with the Rune of Balance, would always be ahead of her in terms of raw stats, and the main reason for this was that she lacked a perfect foundation. When she was in the orphanage, with little knowledge and no proper guidance, she had crossed the next threshold too early. Because of that, her growth had been flawed from the start. Reaching the point where she could truly stand toe-to-toe with Ash was simply not possible. Not yet. Thus, her goal had shifted. She now needed to train her body and mind with complete focus, and above all, perfect her blade art. That was why Alicia was here in the gravity training room, forcing her muscles and lungs to endure this constant strain while honing every movement of her blade. Of course, perfecting the blade was no easy task. It could take years, if not decades, of relentless training to achieve true perfection. And that was only for the talented. Those without talent would require even longer, perhaps a lifetime, and even then might never reach it. To reach true perfection in any weapon, one had to cross 5 stages of weapon mastery. The first stage was to forge a powerful and balanced body through conditioning, mastering posture, grip, and basic attacks until they became pure instinct. The second stage focused on technique. After mastering the basics of the basics, one had to step forward and devote themselves to a weapon art, whether sword, blade, spear, or anything else. The depth of this stage depended entirely on the chosen art. If the art was intricate and powerful, it demanded far more time to master. For example, if a sword art contained 7 distinct stances or forms, then each of them had to be mastered one after another, with patience and precision. This was considered the most difficult stage, and it was also closely connected to the 5th stage. After all, when a person had mastered every stance of a weapon art, they technically reached the pinnacle of that weapon's path. Naturally, one also needed access to a battle art of such quality, which was why Starlight Academy was so sought after. Its resources ranged from powerful weapon arts to even hidden forbidden spells, though the latter were far from easy to obtain. The 3rd stage could only be reached if one had mastered the 1st stage and at least the 2nd form of their battle art. At this stage, the aura finally awakened, and the process of converting mana into aura began. Aura could be shaped for augmentation, unleashed for offense, or bent into techniques limited only by the wielder's elemental affinity. If someone possessed more than one element, the difficulty multiplied, as they had to train each element's control separately while also learning to combine them. The 4th stage was all about perfecting control over aura, refining it to the point where it could be projected outward from the blade while deepening mastery over the weapon art. This was the stage Ray Dawson had reached. Yet for him, advancing to the final stage would be the most difficult part, as his sword art was incomplete. Despite possessing the talent of a sword god, he had forged a style that incorporated techniques from countless sword arts. This made his approach unique, but it also meant that the path to perfection was far more tangled and difficult. The 5th and final stage was the unity of aura, body, and weapon. It was also known as becoming one with the weapon or sword-body unity. Even so, that was not truly the end. Beyond it lay the formation of the weapon domain. And the paths beyond that were far more mysterious. Thus, the goal of Alicia reaching perfection was still very, very far away. But right now, what she was trying to achieve was not perfection itself. It was mastering the first ability of the Blessing of the Moon, a soul-based attack. Her focus was on learning to control its output, which was far more difficult than she had expected. This was the task given to her by Saint Alice, to master her own power and reach the 3rd stage. I can increase the power to full intensity, but it consumes too much mana, And when I try to decrease the intensity of my soul attack, it still ends up consuming too much mana. Although she did not have a perfect foundation, she had already mastered the first stage of the 5 stages of weapon mastery. What she was currently working on was the blade art taught to her by Saint Alice, while also trying to gain complete control over her moon abilities. Letting out a deep sigh, she slumped to the ground and lay on her back, staring up at the ceiling. The gravity here was still triple the normal, yet her body had grown accustomed to it over time. Still, she knew she would need to increase it further if she wanted to push her limits. But today, her mind was not as focused as it should have been. Thoughts kept drifting away from her training. Ash is behaving strangely. She already knew there would be differences between the Ash she remembered from the previous world and the one standing in this one. The greatest difference was in mentality. A person's mind never remains unchanged. It shifts as they grow and live through different experiences. She understood this deeply because she herself was facing something similar. The clash of personalities within her often made her feel conflicted, at times even a little twisted. But isn't there a saying, "When God blocks one path, another path opens"? Alicia murmured softly, almost as if speaking to herself. The same was true in her case. After she awakened her abilities, the potency of her moon mana had increased several-fold. That surge of power had also helped to calm the turbulence in her mind, lessening the intensity of her inner conflict. It didn't mean it had vanished. The clash was still there, half good, half evil, a perfectly neutral tendency. But at least now, the aggressive edge no longer pushed at her thoughts so violently. As long as she did not lose control over her emotions, she could manage it. Sigh, let's give him some time. He deserves it. He will tell me, but I can't just stay still and do nothing. I know he's feeling down. I need to do something. A small smile tugged at her lips as she thought of a way to lift his mood. While one side of Alicia's mind was busy planning a surprise for Ash, his days were becoming nothing but a relentless cycle of training. From morning until night, he began with physical exercises, followed by sword practice. His foundation, the first stage, was flawed, so he had to rebuild it from the ground up. Fortunately, he had done all of this before, which meant the process would be faster this time. After working with his sword, he would circulate mana through his body, controlling its flow and refining his manipulation with patient precision. Then came hours of sparring with Leonard, each clash honing his instincts further. Once that was done, he would retreat into his soul space and read as many books as he could find in the vast libraries of different continents. At the very end of the day, he devoted himself to experimenting with his mana-breathing technique and testing different spells. Keeping himself busy was the only way to stop certain unnecessary thoughts from creeping into his mind. Anyways, the breathing technique was almost complete, but something was missing, the final piece of the puzzle that he needed to find to perfect them. What could it be? He thought about it for a long time, yet no answer came to him. His mind remained blank, and with no progress in sight, he decided to shift his focus elsewhere. Reaching for another book, his gaze fell on one with an unusual title, Death. Its cover felt oddly heavy in his hands, as if the word itself carried weight. It was one of the books he had found in the Dragon's Grand Library. In fact, he had discovered many others on similar topics: types of death, what is death, and countless more. Why the dragons kept such knowledge was a mystery even to him. Ash knew the future had already strayed far from the path he once remembered. Whatever came next would depend entirely on his own choices and his own wits. So, without hesitation, he opened the book on death and began to read. But just as his eyes touched the first page, a faint thought surfaced. Why do I feel like I'm forgetting something? Nothing. And with that, he immersed himself in the words before him. Ash was so consumed while reading the books that he lost track of time. Even though his body and mind were tired, his thoughts remained clear, absorbing everything written in those pages with surprising ease, as if the words were meant for him and him alone. Without death, there can be no life, and without life, death waits unfulfilled. Death was not created by anyone. Death simply was. It had always existed, silent and unmoving, watching the birth and fall of all things. It did not hunger, it did not rage, it simply observed, as patient as the endless void. When life appeared, death did not hate it. Death did not try to destroy it. Instead, it became life's silent partner, walking alongside it without ever speaking a word. For life without an ending is not life at all. It is endless suffering without rest. Death is not the enemy of life, it is the balance that makes life possible. You breathe in, but one day you must breathe out. A river flows, but it must eventually meet the sea. Flowers bloom in beauty, but they must return to the soil that birthed them. Without death, the world would be crowded with things that never leave, never change, and never grow. Death is not darkness, for darkness can be banished by light. Death is not void, for void can be filled. To understand death is to see that it is not a straight road that ends, but a circle that turns forever. What is gone will one day return in another form. Death is the gardener who cuts away the old to let the new grow. Death is the tide that pulls back the waves, only to send them forward again with renewed strength. To those who fear it, death feels like pain and loss. But to those who accept it, death is gentle, like a final lullaby before a deep and peaceful sleep. Ash found himself engrossed in the book, as if the words carried some addictive pull. Each sentence seemed to pull him deeper, and to his surprise, he found the experience strangely captivating. When he finally finished the book, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Closing his eyes, he attempted to convert his mana into death. He could feel the mana stir, the particles colliding, trying to change into something else. Some of them darkened into pitch-black fragments, but each time they flickered briefly before fading away into nothing. Yes, the particles died. And the same thing happened again and again. Time passed, but the essence of death never took form. Looks like I need to read more about it. Though, let's rest for a while. I need to meet with Nancy as well, time is nearing. It was already late, 9:45 in the night. Both Alicia and Ash met at sharp 10 o'clock, and they would spend a few hours together before sleeping. It was their time to rest and relax after the intense workouts and training sessions both of them had endured. Rising from his chair in the Soul Library, Ash willed the bookshelf beside him to move. In the blink of an eye, it was replaced by another, this one bearing the title Death. A single book rested there. The real version was still in Ash's hands, but here, its contents had been preserved in the form of a memory. Rather than Soul Library, I think the name Library of Memories suits it much better. Thinking thoughts like that, Ash exited the library and appeared in his soul space. It was still the same as before, the same soul tree adorned with beautiful and colorful leaves, a bright sky above, and the endless pitch-black sea beneath. Exactly, his soul sea was the same as before, filled with nothing but negative emotions. While it was true that memories did not trouble Ash anymore, but the negative emotions amplified by dark ash still remained, heavy and unmoving. They had not vanished, nor had they faded. These emotions were strange, almost foreign, and he could not wrap his head around them no matter how hard he thought. Even Ash himself could not understand why this was happening, why his emotions were present in his soul sea, and why only the negative ones remained, with not a trace of the positive. Though, my life was filled with more sadness than happiness. The ratio between his happiness and sadness was like 1 to 10, so it was obvious why the negative ones were far more prominent. Do they also serve as water for the tree? It was just a passing thought, a small curiosity, as if wondering whether his emotions acted as nourishment for the soul tree, silently feeding it from the depths of the dark sea. And the reason why his soul tree bark was black. He did not know, but it was a question worth pondering over. Strangely enough, Snow had already found his home. He lived in the soul vault, making piles of gold coins into his nest, curling over them most of the time like a lazy snake draped over its treasure. What was strange was that Snow did not eat anything while in the soul. Yes, exactly, if he stayed here, he needed no food at all. Yet outside, Snow would drain Ash dry without mercy. Looks like Snow likes shiny things, It was definitely a cute thing to watch, but Ash was in a bit of a hurry. If he wasted more time, he would be late to meet with Alicia. He would play with Snow later. After that, he left the soul space. Ash stood up in his dorm room, stretching his hands and body, the stiffness in his muscles making him let out a quiet sigh. He rubbed his eyes, which still begged for sleep and rest, then walked toward the window, gazing at the beautiful moon and the countless stars scattered across the sky. At least this world has a clear sky. There was no pollution here, so the night sky was pure and endless, painting a breathtaking image that felt alive and untouched. To him, it was nothing less than spectacular. As he stood there, his thoughts drifted like clouds, following the pale light of the moon. Then his eyes suddenly widened. Damn! How could I forget that? Ash almost jumped out of the window in shock. He had finally remembered what he had been forgetting all this time. He had completely forgotten to take back the Moonstone and Starstone from the dwarves. But they are all dead. Did the stones even survive the explosion? He did not know, so he did what he had prepared as a countermeasure long ago. He tried to sense the anchor he had placed on the boxes containing the stones, but he sensed nothing. His expression tightened as he opened his status, quickly going into the skill description of Transcendent Step. Skill Transcendent Step. Rank Saint. Description: Transcendent Step allows the user to instantly teleport to any location they have previously visited and any point within their direct line of sight. The user can also mark physical objects to act as teleport anchors, and teleport at that anchor point. Current anchors 1/3. The anchors were only showing one, which meant the other 2 anchors are destroyed. The last anchor had been with Alicia all along, but with the other 2 missing, there was only one conclusion that made sense. Ash exhaled slowly, his gaze heavy. Looks like both the stones got destroyed in the explosion, but still, I can't ignore the possibility that someone took the stones first and then destroyed the boxes. If that's true, I need to confirm it myself. The suspicion was not without reason. After the blast, once his mind had cleared and the dizziness faded, Ash had immediately set out to find the rune in the other cities of the dwarf continent. Everyone in the Iron Hall city had been wiped out, so finding the rune, the very thing he had come here for, became his top priority. Yet the moment he entered the next city, an all too familiar unease washed over him. The same unsettling feeling he had experienced back in Iron Hall City. Trusting his instincts, he used elemental sight, and there they were, Hollowborns, drifting through the air like silent shadows. He left that city at once, his expression growing darker. Then he went to another city, then another, and another. But in every single one, a Hollow Mother awaited him. The only place he hadn't set foot in was the central city. With Hollow Mothers guarding each city, his search for the rune was impossible. Every time he entered, the dwarves would attack him with full force, giving him no chance to investigate. What disturbed him even more was how quickly the Hollow Mothers themselves reacted. The moment he stepped foot into a city, they would move against him directly, almost as if they already knew who he was, as if they knew he was an enemy. It made him wonder if they were connected, sharing some unseen link. Otherwise, it made no sense for them to target him so quickly and with such hostility. Because of this, Ash was unable to obtain the rune, at least for now. Thus, his attention had shifted to training his sword, putting aside the search for the time being. But now, recalling all of it, the unease began to stir again. That lingering what-if circled in his mind, refusing to leave. Sigh. I will think about it later. This was not the moment to dwell on it. Time was slipping away. Only 5 minutes remained before the clock struck 10 p.m., and he had to meet Alicia. Without wasting another moment, Ash teleported away. The moon was shining brightly, illuminating the world with its gentle, beautiful radiance. The water-stained grass glistened under that soft light, each blade shimmering like tiny crystals. The clear lake reflected the moon's glow perfectly, doubling its charm and creating a scene that felt both cozy and calming to the eyes. On such a night, at the highest clock tower in the academy, on its rooftop, two figures suddenly appeared. One was a boy with long white hair and clear blue eyes, his expression carrying a faint smile, touched with a sense of longing. He was dressed in a gray tunic and black pants, the breeze lightly brushing his hair. The other was a girl of the same age, with silver hair and deep crimson eyes, her presence delicate yet captivating. She wore a long, flowing blue dress that swayed gently in the night air. They sat together at the edge of the rooftop, their legs dangling above the vast city lights below. "So, how was the day?" Alicia asked softly, her eyes locking onto Ash's. There was a hidden hunger in her gaze, carefully veiled beneath an innocent expression. "Same old, trained all day," Ash replied, his voice casual as his eyes wandered over the sprawling Nexus city beneath them. Yet he could feel that burning gaze beside him. He knew what it meant, and he wanted to respond to it, but hesitation held him back. Why? Even Ash could not clearly explain. Perhaps it was because Alicia's body was different from Nancy's, though the same was true for him. Or maybe he still thought of them as children. Or perhaps it was nothing more than pure shyness and embarrassment. Whatever the reason, it remained elusive, and he let it be. "And you?" he asked in return, turning his head slightly toward her. "Same old," Alicia answered with a small smile before gently leaning her head against his body. The sudden closeness made Ash instinctively wrap an arm around her, holding her near. But then, damn, it's so soft. A sudden heat rushed through him. Something that should not have been touching him was touching him, and in that instant his body froze, his mind looping like a broken record. Alicia noticed the stiffness in his body, and a mischievous smile formed on her lips. She shifted even closer, letting the warmth and softness seep deeper into him. With sheer willpower, Ash forced his thoughts away from the dangerous territory, trying to focus on the feel of her shoulder beneath his hand instead. But that proved to be a mistake, because the moment his attention shifted, he became far more aware of just how small and soft she truly was. Her shoulder, her frame, every delicate part of her felt as if he were holding something almost unreal, like the smooth, yielding texture of a slime, yet far warmer, far more alive. He could not find the right words to describe it, but every part of him wanted to hold her like this forever, feeling her heat, her heartbeat against him, breathing in her sweet scent until he was completely intoxicated. Is she using some sort of bewitching item? Or is it just the hormones of a young body? Whatever it was, his thoughts tangled into a mess of emotions. Happiness, bliss, embarrassment, shame, and countless others he could not name. Meanwhile, Alicia felt everything as well. She could hear the rhythm of Ash's heartbeat, smell his faintly intoxicating scent, notice the subtle way his body tensed and shifted. Every little reaction of his only made her composure slip further. She wanted to break the distance between them, to step beyond the boundaries they had never crossed before. No, what strange things am I thinking? Her face grew hot, her cheeks burning crimson under the moonlight. They stayed like that, neither speaking, simply enjoying each other's touch and company, feeling the warmth of the other seep into their skin and the steady thump of each other's heartbeat. It was hard for Alicia to calm down. It was rare for both her personalities to urge her toward the same thing, to leap toward Ash without hesitation, yet she was holding herself back with an inhuman will. Taking a deep breath that steadied the rush inside her chest, she finally spoke. "So Ash, will you tell me what it is that's bothering you? You can tell me. Even if I might not be able to help, I can still be here for you. I can listen to you, and there is no need to keep burying certain things inside." Her voice was gentle but carried a firmness, the kind that left no room for retreat. If you let them out, you will feel free. If you bury them, they will become like stagnant water, something that will spill over one day or another. The dam will break someday if you do not let your feelings out. Alicia's words came out calm, almost carrying an allure that could make another person's heart steady, as though her voice itself was urging him to release the weight he carried. Ash's expression faltered for a moment before returning to its usual calm. A silence stretched between them, heavy yet strangely comforting. Ash opened his mouth to speak, but his voice faltered. Unconsciously, he clutched Alicia's shoulder, his grip faint yet filled with hesitation. This made her look toward him, her eyes searching his face. Seeing him struggle, she slowly pushed herself away from him, making him look at her in a faint daze. And then she pulled him closer once again and rested his head on her lap. His face was tilted upward while she gazed downward, their eyes meeting in a quiet exchange that spoke more than words. Speak now. There is no need to feel insecure. No need to let fear or doubt hold you back. Whatever you are feeling, I am here for you. Her way of speaking, combined with her beautiful face now filled with tension and a hint of anger, was a sight to behold. Ash could not help but let out a small chuckle. This time it was Alicia who was left confused, her brows knitting slightly, but Ash continued. I don't know. Although I don't care about anyone else. Whether they live or die, you are right. There was a blast in the dwarven continent. Ash began to speak, and this time he did not stop. He let out everything he had been holding back. He spoke of how he died, the pain that lingered even now, and the nightmares that still clawed their way into his mind. He told her how, on some nights, he exhausted his body until it could not move, simply so he could sleep without dreams. He told her how he blamed himself for the deaths of millions. Even though he claimed he was selfish and did not care for others, there was still a weight pressing on him. Maybe, if he had carried out his investigation properly, if he had not treated things so lightly, maybe he could have saved them. Maybe, if he had searched the dragon's library more thoroughly, he might have found the book on death faster. Maybe, the outcome would have been different. His actions had brought both good and bad results, yet he had been in control of neither. It felt as if unseen strings were guiding his every move, pushing him along paths he had not chosen. Most of the time, his luck shielded him, and even in moments of misfortune, fortune still found him. But that did not make the burden any lighter. Hearing everything Ash had said, Alicia kept her eyes closed, her face holding a neutral expression. Yet beneath it, a storm was rising. Anger. Unbearable anger. It surged within her like a tide threatening to sweep her away. She wanted nothing more than to strike out, to annihilate every dwarf responsible, to crush the Hollow Mother with her own hands. Yet she did not possess that kind of power, not yet. What made her blood boil even more was knowing the depth of Ash's suffering. He had endured unimaginable pain, dying over and over, and here he was, calmly recounting only 2 of those experiences. She had always known he could not truly die, as he had told her personally, but she had never grasped the full scale of his ordeal. She did not care how he had gained his power, but she could not bear that it had come at such a cost to him. This is only 2 times. What about before? How many times had he gone through this? How many times had he died? Her body shuddered at the thought, tears spilling uncontrollably from her eyes. Her heart felt as if it were being squeezed in a vice, each beat stabbing painfully at her chest. How many times did Ash die just to save me? I made him go through all of that. Her gaze fell upon his face, serene and peaceful, lying on her lap as if he were merely resting, eyes closed, unaware of the storm inside her. She wanted to contain it, to wait, to save this feeling for later, but she could not. With a sudden motion, she lunged forward, lifting his head and pressing her lips onto his. Ash's eyes shot wide open, startled, but the sight of tear-filled Alicia pressing herself against him, devouring him with desperate hunger, made his heart hammer violently in his chest. Holding her head and back, he pulled her even closer, their bodies intertwining as they pressed together. Both of them felt the softness, the warmth, the pulse of life in their kiss, the steady heartbeat, the subtle scent that made the moment unbearably intimate and alive. Each second stretched and lingered, every touch and movement carrying a depth neither of them had expected, leaving them both trembling with the intensity of their emotions, unable to pull away even if they wanted to. When the talk is about the best assassin family in the human continent, the Nightshade family comes at the very top. It was not some ancient family with a legacy stretching back through centuries. Only a few decades had passed since its establishment. Even then, It rose like a dark horse, leaving behind all the other guilds and families in the field of assassination, securing the top position for itself. And the reason for this was simple. Two individuals, Victor Nightshade and Iris Nightshade. Victor wielded the powers of darkness and time, while Iris commanded the shadows and the deadly art of poison. Together, the husband and wife became the backbone of the Nightshade family, their strength raising it to a height where no rival could reach. The path had not been smooth. Countless attempts were made to kill them, yet every assassin who came after their lives ended up meeting their own deaths. After all, who could hope to live when the two most powerful mythical ranked assassins in the continent marked them as prey? For their enemies, even the thought of facing Victor and Iris was enough to turn into a waking nightmare. But strength always came with responsibility. With dungeons spawning faster than they could be resolved, both Victor and Iris had little time to rest. The only silver lining was that no dungeon break had happened yet, at least not for now. For the past few months they had been completely occupied. Not just them, but also the assassin units working under the Nightshade family, who were constantly moving across the continent, clearing gates and helping other forces deal with the crisis. Because of this, only the bare minimum security was left to guard the Nightshade estate. But even then, no one in their right mind would ever attempt to intrude into the House of Assassins. One step inside could mean walking straight into a trap they would never escape from. Yet today was not like any other day. Today was different. Both Iris and Victor were at home, having taken a rare break from their endless duties because their son Ethan had come to see them. "Look at how skinny you have become. Does the academy not provide food to you? Just tell me, son. Even though I cannot kill Nicole, I can certainly make his life hell, harass him until he begs for mercy." Iris spoke with a mischievous glint in her eyes, her voice sharp yet filled with a warmth that could only belong to a mother. To the world, she was a terrifying woman, ruthless and unpredictable. But before Ethan, she was simply a mother who doted on her child. They sat together at the grand dining table, a piece of furniture large enough to host a dozen guests. Yet at this moment it held only 3. At the middle seat sat a man with a straight posture and cold eyes, his black hair framing a face that carried an aura of quiet menace. He appeared to be in his late 20s, though in truth he was far older. His presence was like that of a hidden blade, sharp and unseen, ready to strike the moment one's focus faltered. On his left sat a woman whose long black hair cascaded down her shoulders, her crimson eyes glowing faintly in the light. Ethan had inherited those very eyes. Her presence was suffused with a poisonous allure, a paradox of beauty and danger. Yet right now, there was no venom in her gaze, no sharpness in her tone. Only gentleness and warmth shone in her eyes as she looked at Ethan, her one and only son. Ethan chuckled softly at his mother's words, though a trace of helplessness crossed his face. "Mother, the academy feeds us just fine. I am not starving, you are only exaggerating. And please, don't cause trouble for the principal." How should I even say it? Looking at the loving gaze of his mother, Ethan hesitated. He had come here because he wanted their help. He knew, just like Ray had become the disciple of the principal, the same could happen with Ash as well. After seeing Ash's strength surpass even Ray, it was obvious that he was bound to become someone important. Even if not a disciple, he would certainly be considered a valuable asset for humanity as a whole. The fact that he did not attend classes yet faced no punishment was a simple, undeniable proof of that. But what Ethan wanted most was for Ash to die. Ray had escaped his wrath because he had rejected Malicia and stayed away from her, leaving Ethan's path clear. But things were different with Ash. While Ash showed no interest in Malicia, the same could not be said for her. Malicia loved Ash. Ethan could see it clearly, he knew it without doubt. This time was different from Ray. He could feel it even if he could not always see it. Malicia was obsessed with Ash, just as he himself was obsessed with her. But his obsession ran far deeper. From his childhood years to now, the desire had taken root in every corner of his being. He did not simply want her love. No, he wanted to possess her entirely. He wanted to own her. "So why did you come back?" The semester exams are coming. I hope the reason you returned is important. Victor's cold voice broke through the storm of Ethan's thoughts. When his focus returned, Ethan saw his father had stopped eating, his eyes fixed on him. That gaze was cold and sharp, still carrying the weight of countless battles fought. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, feeling the pressure. Just stop it. You do this every time you meet him. Do you really expect him to answer honestly when you're putting such pressure on him? Iris's irritated voice cut through the tension. Victor lowered his gaze and resumed eating, as if being scolded by her was the most natural thing in the world. Ethan let out a quiet sigh of relief, but the silence that followed pressed on him even more heavily. He knew he had to respond. Even while she defended him, his mother was still watching closely, waiting for his answer. What should I do? I need their help. If I try something on my own, I will be tracked, and then everyone will know I tried to kill Ash. But will my parents help me? He was certain they would help him with anything else, but this was about killing someone his age. Even though his parents were veteran killers, he could not be sure if they would agree. They might, and they might not. It was a gamble, and the risk lay entirely in his hands. I came here because I just wanted to see both of you before the exams. And, as he hesitated, a warm hand rested gently on his own. It was Iris. Her touch calmed the tremor in his heart. Yet instead of steadying him, it changed his words. And I am not sure if I will be able to take the first position in my class, because there are two monsters who are far stronger than me. At the end, he changed what he truly wanted to say. He simply did not dare to ask his parents for help. From his early childhood, Ethan had been trained to act properly, trained to wield weapons, trained to kill without hesitation. But he had never been trained to speak openly with his parents. When he was young, it had not seemed like a problem. Yet, as he grew older, so did the distance between him and them. Most of the time, they were absent. And when they were home, they used the time to train him not to truly speak with him. While sometimes his mother did try to show love, by then it was already too late. Ethan had grown more than capable of not caring about such things. And the reason for that was Milicia. From an early age, the place his parents should have taken in his heart was filled by her instead. Her bright smile, her clumsy games, her childish warmth, all of it took root so deeply in his mind that even when he saw Milicia's feelings shift from one person to another, his own heart never wavered. No matter how much she loved someone else, his heart still beat for her, and his love never diminished. Being called the greatest disease was not just a saying. It was a reality. Hearing Ethan's words, both Victor and Iris sighed. For a moment, they thought their son was in some grave trouble, but realizing he was only nervous about disappointing them in the exams felt like such a silly concern. My child, you don't have to worry about that, Iris spoke gently. Even if you don't take the first position, as long as you try your best and improve from the previous version of yourself, we will be happy. She gave him a soft smile before continuing. The Starlight Academy is a gathering place for hidden talents, so it is not surprising that 2 stars are shining brighter for now. But do not lower yourself because of them. You are still growing, and I believe my son will surpass them sooner or later. So don't worry about the results. Stop it. You will make him too comfortable. Victor cut her off, his cold voice sinking into the air as his gaze locked onto Ethan. I remember we already had this conversation when you first entered the academy. I expected there would be another time when we would speak like this again, but so soon. His voice turned sharper, each word carrying weight. Did you give up already? Did you not even try? That is not what I expect from you, Ethan. Ethan's head sank lower, shame tightening his chest. You are my son, our son. You should be fearless, and you should try to overcome all difficulties. Yet here you are, faltering before even giving it your all. The table fell into silence, heavy and suffocating, until Victor finally sighed and spoke again. Listen, I know it may feel as if every road before you is blocked, but there is always another path. You have not found it yet, because your imagination is still too shallow. His tone eased, though it remained steady. And in the end, just as your mother said, do your best. Even if the result is not what you want, I do not care. As long as you become the best version of yourself, that will be enough for me. Finishing his words, Victor returned to his meal, occasionally glancing at Ethan as if to ensure he had understood. Don't mind him, son, Iris said softly, reaching out to lightly touch his arm. You know how your father is. He cannot show emotions properly, but his actions speak for him. What he said was filled with love, even if his voice makes it sound otherwise. So don't take it too harshly, all right? Hearing his mother's words, Ethan nodded quietly, but his mind was not calm. His father's words echoed inside him again and again. I should be fearless and try to overcome all difficulties. The roads are not blocked. I just haven't found the way yet. Yes, I need to try on my own. I lack the courage to even ask for their help. I need to do it myself. And if I cannot, then I must do it in a way where no one can ever trace the evidence back to me. Yes, that is what I will do. Ash was ascending to the heavens. His mood was at the peak of happiness, something he had never felt since transmigrating into this world. A smile refused to leave his face, and he had finally managed to overcome the lingering emotions that weighed on him after returning from the Dwarven continent. A few days ago, he and Alicia... Night. No, we didn't cross the line, it was just a kiss, just a kiss. Even though several days had passed, that grin of his never faded. Whether he was training or completing other tasks, it always lingered. After that night, the distance between them had lessened considerably, and their closeness had reached a new level. Every time he recalled that moment, the warmth of her lips and the gentleness in her eyes replayed in his mind like a memory carved into his very soul. And it was actually carved into his soul. It was just a simple kiss, filled with hunger to devour each other. Yet it carried a weight he could not put into words. For Ash, who had lived in constant struggle ever since coming to this world, that fleeting moment felt like the first ray of dawn after a long, endless night. It was something he wanted to hold on to, a quiet strength that made him believe perhaps he truly belonged here, not just as a stranger in another body but as someone who could live and laugh. It was this feeling that carried him forward, making even the bitter memories of the Dwarven continent a little easier to bear. The moon and star stone, which Ash was supposed to deliver to the saint in the Dwarven lands, had been destroyed. And even if the stones have survived, the dwarves being under the control of the Hollow No Queen made the task meaningless. To add to it, just a day ago, the principal had summoned him. Because Ash technically failed to complete the mission, no matter the circumstances, he had been given another task, to secure the first position in the semester exams. What a grumpy old man. Can't he just give me a privilege at once? I swear he was smirking when he handed out that task. With that thought lingering in his mind, Ash walked toward one of the academy's examination halls. Today was special, after all. It was the beginning of the exams. The academy grounds buzzed with students. Groups huddled together, their voices overlapping in excitement and nervousness. Ash moved among them quietly, his absolute concealment active, making him nearly invisible to their senses. Now that the charm suppressors he was supposed to purchase from the dwarves were out of reach, this skill had become his only reliable option. He did not waste time lingering and walked at a brisk pace. But even then he heard the talks of the students. Bro, I feel like my head is going to burst. I crammed everything I could, but I still feel like I'll fail the written test. For real, man, I feel the same. What did you even study? I didn't touch a single book. I slept through the whole day yesterday. Look at this liar trying to act casual. If you score higher than me, I'll make you see stars in the morning. Yeah, I'll help too. This bastard probably studied days ago. Traitor. Ash overheard their chatter and could not help but smile in amusement. No matter the world, no one likes exams. But he actually liked them. At least now he did. Because unlike others, he could cheat. Reading any book and storing its contents perfectly in his mind made exams nothing but child's play for him. Reasoning questions related to mana and magic required actual understanding, but even those he could solve with enough focus. As long as he grasped the concept, his mind could do the rest flawlessly. The exams in Starlight Academy were divided into 3 phases. The first was the written phase, the most basic. Yet it was also the least rewarding, contributing only 20% of the total marks. Usually, it was completed in just 1 day. The second phase was the practical examination, where students had to demonstrate what they had learned over the months. Every detail of their performance was recorded, and they were strictly forbidden from repeating the same techniques in the following semester. This rule existed so students would continue to grow instead of remaining stagnant. Those who failed to improve were immediately expelled. The practical phase generally lasted 1 or 2 days, depending on the number of participants. It covered 30% of the total marks. The third and final phase was the most challenging and unpredictable, stretching over a week. In this phase, 2 teams of 5 randomly selected students were dropped onto unknown islands scattered across the ocean. The Academy had built bases on 100 such islands specifically for this purpose. On each island, 2 teams would be released, and they had to compete directly with one another. The final evaluations were then made by the instructors, based on several factors that went far beyond mere strength. But this time, even Ash was uncertain whether the last phase would remain the same. According to the principle, the dungeons are spawning faster and faster. That means the space itself is weakening, a clear sign that the demons are up to something. Because of this, Ash could not be sure if the Academy would risk sending students into dangerous territory again. Still, he leaned toward the least possibility. If in the original novel the Academy had sent students even after so many demon attacks, then the chance of them doing so now was very high as well. "Hey, Ash!" As he was walking, a voice suddenly called out to him. Turning his head, he saw a girl with black hair and blue eyes walking toward him, smiling brightly while waving her hand. It was Amelia Vaynar. Ash stopped and gave a small nod in response. Coming in front of him, she asked, "Let's go together. I was also heading to the exam hall." "All right," Ash replied, and just like that, they started to walk side by side. This time, whether it was because he was walking with a girl or simply because presence of Amelia, the gazes of the surrounding students shifted toward them, their eyes filled with curiosity. Whispers began to spread quietly through the hallways as more people noticed. What a headache. Ash's mood turned slightly sour, his expression tightening a little. Amelia POV. He looks happy, Amelia thought as her eyes lingered on Ash, noticing the faint glow of emotions surrounding him. And it seems like he isn't even trying to hide it. She wasn't sure what had happened with him after he returned to the Academy, but she had noticed the change. There were times she could see emotions radiating clearly around him, and other times she saw nothing at all. From this, she guessed that Ash had gained some kind of ability to control his emotions. In truth, Ash had not gained complete control, but with the help of the Soul Library, he could at least regulate them partially. Still, there were always moments when things slipped through, events that even he could not fully suppress. Even so, the fact that he had gained this much control shocked Amelia. She knew well how difficult it was to restrain one's emotions, which made her even more curious. If Ash had truly gained full control, she would have been able to see absolutely nothing from him. As they walked together, Amelia noticed the students' eyes constantly following them. Some looked at her, while mostly stared at Ash, whispering among themselves. That was when she saw the shift in his emotions, a faint ripple of irritation slipping through his calm facade. Does he get irritated due to attention? Amelia sighed inwardly. She had called out to him on a whim, simply because she had seen him walking ahead. But now that they were together, she found herself at a loss for words. Wait, maybe I could ask that. Hey, should we take an empty path? Amelia suggested, her voice quieter than before. What she wanted to talk about wasn't something to discuss in the middle of a crowded hallway. Yeah, sure, Ash replied casually, almost relieved, and agreed without hesitation. They changed their route and took a slightly longer path that was far less crowded, a calm silence settling between them. After taking a deep breath to gather her courage, Amelia finally spoke. Ash, I wanted to ask something. Ask away. Ash replied nonchalantly, keeping his eyes straight ahead. Do you know about my powers? The question made him pause for a moment, confusion flickering across his face. Still, he answered smoothly, Alicia told me it was somewhat related to receiving revelations. After all, wasn't it you who told her about the demon's attack on the academy? He twisted his words carefully, choosing them with precision. By including Alicia's name, he made it sound like he only knew the same things everyone else did. He had no intention of letting Amelia discover that he knows about her affinity with fate. That secret was hidden from all the students, and he intended to keep it that way. I see, Amelia replied softly, lowering her head a little. Then do you know why can't I see you in my revelations? Her question made a small crack appear in Ash's control, but he quickly smoothed it over. He did not hide everything, though, which could possibly make her even more certain there was something he was hiding. Nervousness. That was what Amelia caught for the briefest moment before it vanished completely. No, wait, was that even nervousness? Felt slightly different, but it was too fast for me to catch clearly. Still, it was definitely there. The truth was, Amelia already knew the answer. She wasn't asking to find out why. She was asking to see how Ash would react. After all, she still hadn't told her grandfather about Ash, and her grandfather hadn't told her to stop investigating the anomaly either. Today, however, she wanted to confirm something for herself. I don't know why you didn't see me. Let me guess, the visions you saw must not have been complete, so obviously I wouldn't appear in them. You're just asking unusual questions. Are you fine? Or do you have exam fever? Ash replied, trying to turn her serious question into something lighthearted. But I saw. Before Amelia could press further, a sharp ringing sound echoed. It was a call coming through Ash's watch. He glanced at the caller, and the moment he saw the name, his lips curved into a smile. Thank God you called and saved me from this questioning. It's Alicia. I'll go now. She's waiting for me. Without giving her a chance to respond, Ash teleported away in an instant, ignoring the academy rule that forbade using abilities inside the grounds. Wait. Amelia instinctively tried to stop him, reaching out her hand, but it was useless. He was gone. Ah! Damn bastard, he ran away. Now what should I do? Right, if he wants to run, then I'll just tell Grandpa. About him, yeah. Though, I will include that he is not evil. Humph, but that is only because of Alicia. Your call just saved me from a hassle. Thanks a lot. While walking on the cobblestone path toward the academy exam hall, Ash's words made Alicia raise her eyebrow in curiosity, her steps slowing slightly. Why so? She asked, tilting her head as her long hair brushed lightly against her shoulder. Nothing in particular. Anyway, leave that aside. Tell me, did you prepare for the test today? Ash's tone carried a hint of excitement that did not go unnoticed. Alicia's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, her lips curving into a faint smile as though she had stumbled upon something strange. No matter how much I look at you, I cannot seem to find the previous Ash in you. You are somewhat different. Her words hit harder than he expected. Ash's expression faltered as he looked at her, her voice sounding more like an accusation than a casual remark. What the? Now, how the hell am I different? His mind scrambled for an answer, but nothing he thought of seemed to explain why she would say that. Without waiting for him to respond, she continued softly, You never liked exams at all, but now you seem strangely excited for it. Ash chuckled quietly. What she said was true. He had always hated exams before, and even if he did not want to admit it, the change in him was undeniable. Just then, something cold and smooth slithered around his neck before darting onto Alicia. Snow wrapped itself around her shoulders, its snowy white scales gleaming faintly under the sunlight, before rubbing its head affectionately against her cheek. Ah! Snow, is Papa feeding you properly? If not, you can always come to Mama. Ash almost tripped at her words, his face heating up in an instant. He quickly turned his head away, hoping she would not notice the red creeping up his ears. Damn, she is really blunt. He did not know why he was reacting like this, but his chest felt strangely warm, as though her words had burrowed deep into him. The more he tried to suppress it, the more that unfamiliar heat spread through his body. Mama! No! Mama! I am not going to tell her what you were saying. Snow flicked its tongue and nuzzled against Alicia, clearly asking to be fed. But there was no way Ash would allow it. The thought of the serpent sinking its fangs into her, even if it was harmless, was completely unacceptable. Please don't do that, otherwise I will be angry. Mama! The little serpent gave a sulky hiss before vanishing from sight, though it remained coiled securely around Alicia's shoulders. Ash blinked, unable to detect it anymore, realizing it had wrapped itself in concealment. The strange part was that the concealment resembled the same protection that hid his own body from outside senses. How could a serpent so young use such an ability? Ash had no answer. His only guess was that it had awakened something from its bloodline or developed a new ability of its own. Perhaps it was instinct. After all, the status window had revealed nothing useful. If only the window had shown its abilities clearly, Ash would have already known about the dream manipulation power it possessed before Snow showed him. Let her stay with me for a while, Alicia said with a smile, gently stroking Snow as if she had already claimed it. No! Ash's refusal came sharp and immediate, surprising even himself. But why? She asked, her lips curving into a teasing pout as her bright eyes shimmered with playful innocence. Cute. Her expression made his chest tighten, and though he tried to resist, his will wavered. In the end, he sighed and reluctantly gave in. Fine, but don't let her bite you. She tends to drink all the blood inside the body. Also, serpent is not a her. No, wait, what's the gender of the serpent? Damn, I don't even know if it is a male or female. It's a female, Alicia replied confidently, almost smug. Ash raised his eyebrow as they reached closer to the exam hall. Pray tell, how do you know that? When even I don't know. Instead of answering, Alicia suddenly skipped ahead and spun around to face him, her hair fluttering in the wind and her skirt trailing like a ribbon. It's a woman's intuition. You wouldn't understand how sharp it can be. Also, good luck with your exams. Bye, see you soon. Before he could reply, she dashed toward the towering stone gate of the exam hall, her laughter echoing faintly in the air. Ash stood frozen for a moment, dazed, his eyes involuntarily drawn to her as the wind teased the edges of her skirt. Oh no, why is she even running like that? His face flushed red, his thoughts straying to places he immediately regretted. With a flustered heart, he chased after her. Hey, don't run. At least say bye with a kiss at least. I wanted it as a good luck charm. And so, a boy and a girl ran side by side toward the exam hall, laughing and arguing lightly, while the curious eyes of students and teachers followed them. For Ash, the non-existent nervousness of the exam had already started to fade, replaced by the warmth of her presence lingering in his chest. The first day of exams passed without anything exciting happening. Most questions were tied to the fields each student had chosen. Since most of Ash's subjects leaned on theory, he breezed through them without much effort. The real problem came with the compulsory subject of Teacher Elva, mana manipulation. The moment Ash read the questions, he felt as if he had been thrown back into the torture of his previous world. Ah! Maths will not leave me alone. Even in this world. In truth, Ash's math skills were quite average, not too good but not too bad either. It was something he could handle, but it drained him mentally and he had always hated the subject with a passion. I thought reasoning would be about logic and analysis. Why did they have to mix maths into it? Teacher Elva never mentioned a single word about maths during her classes, so why is it suddenly here, and that too tied with mana? His frustration was rising, and from the noise spreading through the room, he was not the only one. What the hell? Why did maths show up? I thought I left that nightmare behind when I came to the academy. I'm doomed. I'm so doomed. The entire paper was different from last year. There was no maths in it before? Can you believe it? Damn my luck. I'm filing a complaint with the principal after this. The exam hall buzzed with curses and groans, every student looking as if they had been collectively betrayed. It was not like they have not studied maths, it's just other have studied before coming into the academy. Looks like I am not the only one. Ash sighed quietly and lowered his head again, trying not to let the noise distract him. The exam itself was 6 hours long considering it covered all 5 subjects, clearly designed to test how much pressure the students could endure and how well they could maintain their focus until the very end. For Ash, things turned out unexpectedly well. In fact, they went far better than he had imagined. His memory stirred and brought forth formulas he had learned in his previous life, formulas that matched the strange problems written on the paper. Somehow, those old fragments of knowledge allowed him to solve question after question without much trouble. Call it luck, he thought with a bitter chuckle, scribbling down yet another answer that made sense only because he studied maths in previous life. One of the questions, for example, was written like this: if a mana particle moves in a circular path with a radius of 2 units, completing 60 revolutions per second, calculate the centrifugal force exerted on the particle, given its mana density is equivalent to 3 units. For most, it looked like nonsense, but to Ash, the pattern was obvious. This is just circular motion physics. Centrifugal force equals mass multiplied by velocity squared, divided by the radius. They just replaced mass with mana density. His pen scratched across the paper as the answer came to him almost naturally. It was strange, but his Earth's knowledge blended with this world's test in a way he could not have imagined. By the time the exam ended, many students looked pale and broken, some even trembling from exhaustion. Ash, however, walked out of the hall calmly, his concealment ability already activated. His expression carried no pride, only a faint smile tugging at his lips. Not bad. If maths from my old world can help me here, maybe it is not as useless as I thought. And just like that, Ash made it through the first day of the exams. The second day of the exams was even simpler than the written tests. The student only had to step into the evaluation hall where 6 teachers were already seated, waiting to evaluate them. Their judgment was based on skills, the power behind one's attack, and the amount of growth a student had shown so far. After all knowledge was already tested, now was the time to test the practical skills. If all of these things were taken into account, then Ash was bound to get the highest marks. After all, no one had experienced growth as drastic as he had. Well, except for Ray. When his turn came, Ash calmly stepped forward and displayed the spark spell. The lightning ball explosion made a large dent in the power testing machine, which was supposed to withstand the full force attack of a master. With the primordial core enhancing his mana, the power behind the spell was already overwhelming, far beyond what should have been possible at his rank. The teachers exchanged stunned glances, their faces stiff as if they had just seen something impossible. They even misjudged his rank, believing that Ash was already a middle expert rank. To them, such rapid advancement, from a mere novice to this level in only 5 months, was unheard of. The funny part was that Ash said nothing to correct them. They had assumed everything on their own. The rune of concealment completely threw them off track, forcing them to misunderstand him even more. Sigh. Ash chose not to correct their assumptions. If they found out that he could display the strength of an early master while still being at the early adept rank, who could say what they would try to do to him? They also asked Ash how he was able to cover his hands with mana, and why his physical strength was comparable to that of a trained warrior. Ash calmly replied that it was nothing more than a simple physical augmentation spell, along with another spell he had created to enhance his attacks. Although his explanation sounded casual, the teachers did not believe him. Their eyes lingered on him with suspicion, but in the end, they chose not to question him any further. Although he did not know the exact marks he would receive for this test, judging from the shocked expressions of the teachers, he was confident that his results would be much better than the others. Yeah, I should not get arrogant. As Ash stepped out of the presentation hall, the gathered crowd instinctively moved aside, clearing a path for him as if he were some dangerous figure. It looked like they believed that if they blocked his way, he might beat them without hesitation. Out of the way, the devil is coming. Shit! I saw him. Now my exam will definitely be ruined. Don't say that out loud. If he hears you, you're finished. I heard he beat up some students just for looking at Alicia. Are you serious? Of course. I was the one who got beaten. Ash's lips twitched at their words. His senses, sharpened by the dormant dragon blood in his body, were much keener than ordinary humans. Even though his bloodline had not awakened, his hearing was sensitive enough to easily pick up conversations happening several meters away. Devil, really? I never did anything. They're slandering my name. To be honest, Ash was tempted to put those rumors to rest with his fists. But he knew if he acted now, his reputation as a devil would be confirmed forever. Then, from the very next day, people would whisper things like, "The devil beat a student who dared to look at him," or "The devil beat a student just for talking about him." That was something Ash did not want. So, despite the itch in his hands, he chose to remain silent and left quietly. At this point, such rumors had become an everyday part of his life. No matter where he went or who he was with, people always whispered behind his back. Of course, it was true that he had beaten up students before, but only those who had dared to look at Alicia with filthy gazes. That much he did not regret, and it was also the root of most of the rumors about him. Ignoring the idle chatter, Ash shifted his focus to something that weighed far more heavily on his mind. My stats have only increased by 1 point. He was now experiencing a severe lack of growth, almost as if someone had cursed him after seeing his streak of good fortune. Attributes: Strength, 401 402. Agility, 401 402. Vitality, 401 402. Intelligence, 401 402. Stamina, 401 402. Charm, 401 402. Mana, 401 402. 2x. The numbers hardly moved, and no matter how much effort he poured into training, the results felt hollow. Though his efforts had shown results in building a clean foundation for the sword, it was far from easy. He had to let go of his old habits, break the patterns that had once felt natural, and slowly replace them with new ones. The process was difficult, almost like unlearning how to walk and then learning it all over again in a different way. Yet despite the struggle, Ash managed to shed his old flaws bit by bit, steadily shaping himself into someone who could wield the blade with true purpose. He had not fully mastered the stage yet, but Ash knew that if he dedicated just a month to focused practice, he would definitely attain it. By comparison, this progress was already astonishingly fast, since on average it took at least 6 months for a person to reach the first stage, and the exact time often depended on one's talent and determination. Even though this was good news, it did not erase the frustration of his slow stat growth, which remained a constant weight on his mind. Ash could not understand why this was happening, and that only left him upset. He knew he had to think of ways to overcome this potential problem because if his growth really slowed down here, then it could spell disaster for his future. Ash did know of a few possible ways to break through this stagnation, but none of them were easy, and most of them were extreme. The first was to accept demonic energy into his body, which would forcefully raise his potential. But that was a path he did not want to take. The second option was to unlock the 2 bloodlines that slumbered within him, with the exception of the dragon bloodline. Yet, he had no idea what those bloodlines were or how he was supposed to awaken them. The rune of concealment only made things worse, for it prevented him from seeking guidance from anyone else, leaving him trapped in uncertainty with no clear path forward. Still, he knew one thing. According to the words of the World Tree, those 2 bloodlines were sealed not out of rejection, but because they judged his body unfit to bear their power. That truth alone left him deeply perplexed. How could a body refined and enriched with so many runes still not be considered perfect? What a picky bloodlines I have. The third method was more of a gamble than a plan, to search for other runes in the world or maybe the universe, hoping that one of them might have the ability to increase his potential or grant him a way to overcome this block. But this was uncertain, since he had no proof that such a rune even existed, let alone any clue about where to find it. Lastly, there was another possibility, one just as risky as the first: absorbing holy energy. In theory, much like demonic energy, the holy energy of angels should also be capable of increasing one's potential. At least technically. However, it came with unimaginable dangers. The angels were known to be extremely possessive of their power, according to the novel, and if anyone dared to steal it, the only outcome would be death. According to the Whisperer, an angel would soon descend into the world of Ecumia, and Ash had once thought about seizing that chance. But he had long abandoned that reckless idea. Why invite such certain trouble when other options might exist? Instead, Ash considered a different approach. Rather than killing the angel and making an enemy of heaven itself, he could instead follow the angel back to their realm. In the heavens, holy energy flowed endlessly, more abundant than anywhere else. If he could find a way to reach that place, there would be no need to kill anyone at all, and he would gain as much holy energy as he needed. As he walked toward the exit, his eyes caught a figure in the distance. It was not difficult to recognize that striking shade of bright red hair in the academy, since only Malicia possessed it. The way her hair caught the faint light made her stand out, even from afar. Did she awaken her bloodline? The thought lingered in his mind, stirring curiosity about what might have changed in her. After all, the events of the future were already flowing unpredictably because of him, so he wanted to see for himself. Why am I suddenly remembering the phrase "curiosity killed the cat"? Shaking his head, he decided to follow and observe her from afar. A few days ago, the human continent was vast, its cities and settlements connected through countless roads, railway tracks, and even teleportation points. Yet despite all this development, a large portion of the continent remained untouched. Not everything had been cut down or destroyed in the name of civilization. Only about 60% of the land was claimed and populated by humans, while the remaining 40% remained covered in wilderness, with forests, lakes, mountains, and even forbidden zones. Forbidden zones were, just as their name suggested, regions where entry was strictly prohibited. Some existed because they contained high-ranking dungeons that could break at any moment, areas that were initially dangerous but eventually became safe zones over time. These were known as temporary forbidden zones. But there also existed permanent forbidden zones. These were shaped not by dungeons but by the sheer power of nature itself, where the environment was so hostile that humans simply could not survive there. One such permanent forbidden zone existed within the human continent, though there were many others spread across the world. At the entrance to this zone, the air shimmered unnaturally and two figures appeared. One of them was tall and poised, her presence radiating quiet authority. Her black hair was neatly tied back, and her onyx eyes seemed deep enough to swallow the space around her. The other was in sharp contrast. A much younger girl, barely 15 or 16, stood there with messy hair, tired red eyes, and heavy dark circles beneath them. Her appearance alone told the story of sleepless nights and inner turmoil. "Miss, we are here." The older woman's voice carried a slight tension as she spoke, her gaze settling on the girl beside her. Yet the younger one did not respond. Whether she ignored the words or simply had no strength to reply was hard to tell. They were Naira and Malicia. Naira could not understand what had happened to Malicia. Ever since the girl entered the academy, Naira had not been able to watch over her closely, though gathering information was not difficult for someone like her. Still, even with her resources, all she could learn was surface level. The only thing of note she discovered was the rise of an unexpected student within the academy, a boy named Ash, who had become something of a dark horse. What are the chances that it is the same boy we gave a ride to the academy? She quickly dismissed the thought. To her, the chances were almost non-existent. Ash had been far too weak back then, and she had been certain he would never even qualify to enter the academy. The academy maintained strict control over information. Anything truly important would be filtered first through the Tower Master, St. Lucan, which meant outside knowledge was limited and heavily restricted. In the end, Naira still could not find the reason why Malicia had become so frail and disheveled. Seeing her once bright figure now reduced to this messy, almost lifeless state, left Naira unsettled. Her chest felt strangely tight, and her hands clenched unconsciously before she took a deep breath to steady herself. This way. Come quickly. Even as Naira was lost in thought, Melissia suddenly broke into a run across the blackened ground. This forbidden region was known as the Land of Black Ashes. Naira followed her closely, striding quickly to keep up. But no matter how far her eyes searched, there was nothing here but emptiness. Not even air existed naturally in this place. The very land had been scorched by flames ages ago, flames so fierce that even after centuries, the marks of their destruction remained. The ground was pitch black, cracked and lifeless, with not a single tree in sight. Broken stones littered the wasteland, their surfaces scarred as if they had been cursed. It was a desert of darkness where ashes rained endlessly from the sky, falling like a reminder of what this land had once endured. Both girls wore protective artifacts just to breathe here. Though it was a forbidden zone, such rules only applied to ordinary people and the weak. For those with strength and power, these restrictions were nothing more than a suggestion. Why are we even here? Naira's gaze stayed fixed on Melissia's small frame as she ran ahead. Her steps carried a sense of restless urgency. Right, we came here because Miss claims to have found a way to awaken the bloodline slumbering deep within her mortal flesh. When Melissia had called her in a rush, insisting it was important and that it could affect the family, Naira had expected some kind of danger, perhaps a hidden discovery or a threat that needed to be dealt with. But when she heard the truth, that it had all started from a dream, Naira found herself doubting. A dream? Could Miss have an affinity for revelations? I do not think so. Still, it was not about what she believed. Melissia had made her choice, and Naira's duty now was to protect her no matter what. Even so, Naira could not shake off the discomfort that settled in her heart as she watched Melissia's weary figure. Her thoughts were cut short when Melissia suddenly stopped. They stood before a narrow crack in the ground, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. We have to go in there. Melissia's voice was calm yet heavy, carrying both determination and fatigue. Her eyes, though dim and stripped of their usual glow, still burned with an unshakable resolve. Naira opened her mouth, wanting to object, but when her gaze fell upon Melissia's expression, she swallowed her words and silently shifted her eyes toward the crack. All right, move aside, miss. I will widen the opening first so that— No! Before Naira could finish, Melissia threw out her arms, shielding the crack with her small body. Her desperate shout cut through the silence, startling Naira into stillness. You cannot widen the crack. We must enter it as it is. Otherwise, everything will collapse. Her tone was steady, almost commanding, as if she knew exactly what she was doing, as if she had already foreseen the consequences of any mistake. Though Naira hesitated, Melissia's persistence eventually wore her down. With effort, she allowed herself to be convinced. Taking the lead for safety's sake, Naira crawled into the narrow gap first. The passage was uncomfortably tight, but not impossible. Her body could move through if she angled herself correctly. It was not her size that made it difficult. It was something else. Her chest made the movement awkward, forcing her to twist and struggle a little more than she would like. This is quite embarrassing. I'm glad no one can see me like this. Her cheeks warmed faintly, a light blush softening her flawless face as she crawled deeper. Since the crack's entrance began at ground level, the path slanted downward with a slow but steady descent, leading them further into the earth. After what felt like several hundred meters, the path abruptly ended at a wide opening. A gaping hole stretched below, swallowing all light into endless darkness. Naira instinctively hesitated. Her mythical senses, which normally never failed her, were being muffled as though something unseen was actively cutting them off. What in the world is down there? We have to go down. Melissia's calm declaration came just before Naira could even voice her concern. Without warning, she grabbed Naira tightly and pushed them both into the abyss. Shit! The tunnel behind them was too narrow for Naira to react in time. She could not brace herself against the walls, and Melissia's sudden push left her no choice. They plummeted into the void together. The fall was swift and merciless. Their bodies tore through the empty air, yet strangely, there was no resistance. It was as if they were plunging through nothingness, their speed only growing faster and faster without end. Naira opened her mouth to shout, but no sound escaped. Her voice could not travel, for there were no particles here to carry it. This was not just a cavern. This was a true forbidden zone. The surface had merely been the entrance, a warning of what lay beneath. As the fall continued, Naira clutched Melissia tightly, her mind racing. I cannot seem to fly. Looks like I need to use my mana. At her level, flight was second nature, a skill that required no conscious effort. Yet in this place, with no molecules to push against, even the simplest movement was impossible. To take control, she would have to rely on her own energy. Then, Melissia raised her hand. A small flame flickered to life, only to vanish instantly into the void, snuffed out by the absence of oxygen. But in that single heartbeat of light, Naira caught a glimpse of the ground far below. It was only for a split second, yet it was enough. She measured the distance and predicted the moment of impact. When Melissia summoned a second flame, Naira made her move. Rather than waste mana on flight, she activated her skill. The world shifted, and in the blink of an eye, she teleported to solid ground, pulling Melissia with her. The instant her feet touched the surface, a ripple of invisible energy spread out from her body, forming a protective layer. She had opened her domain, sealing a portion of the space around them. Here, her mana replaced the missing atmosphere. Even if she could endure this strange place, Melissia would not survive without it. But what is this strange place? As the domain expanded, air and energy flowed once more. Melissia conjured another flame, and this time it burned steadily, feeding on the mana-filled air around them. The light spread outward, revealing the world hidden in the abyss. Naira's breath caught in her throat, her lips parting in disbelief. Her eyes widened as she stared ahead, unable to comprehend what lay before her. By the damn gods, why is this here? In the endless darkness, where there was no light, no air, and no atmosphere, a dark vacuum stretched below the surface of the world, hidden deep within one of the forbidden zones. For the first time, it had intruders. Or perhaps not. The darkness was slowly chased away by the faint but bright flame produced by Melissia, burning gently within the small domain Naira had unfolded. Though the light was not strong enough to illuminate far, it was still enough to reveal the scenery in front of them. The ground was scorched black just like the surface above, though here it was covered in thick dunes of black sand. Yet that was not what drew Naira's breath to a halt. Are these all bones? Her thoughts trembled with cold dread as her eyes scanned the countless bones sprawled across the black dunes. There were human bones scattered everywhere, but among them lay enormous remains of abominations as well. She could make out the faint silhouette of a giant creature resembling an elephant, yet it was twisted with horns and skeletal wings that seemed far too unnatural. Some bones were half-burned, their ends charred as if scorched by some ancient fire, while others were broken and piled into hills, forming grotesque mounds. The sheer number of human remains was uncountable, as if entire armies had marched into this abyss only to be swallowed forever. For Naira, it felt less like she had stepped into a simple graveyard, and more like she was standing in the heart of one massive grave itself. Are these all the humans who once dared to venture into the forbidden zones? It was always a mystery why so many who entered were either found dead on the surface or simply disappeared without a trace. Those whose bodies remained above were at least known to have perished. But those who vanished without leaving behind even bones, perhaps they had all ended up here. Perhaps they too had once descended with hopes of finding treasures or secrets, only to meet their end like the ones beneath her feet. Melissia also stood frozen for a moment, her gaze fixed upon the eerie sight that stretched endlessly before them. Yet unlike Naira, there was no fear in her eyes. Instead, there was a quiet spark, faint but burning, like a candle in a storm, a spark of anticipation, of something long sought after. To her, this place was not merely a graveyard but the last step toward her dream. She was closer than ever, just a few steps away from awakening her bloodline. She did not know why, but after enduring the pain of rejection and despair that weighed on her heart, she now longed for nothing but distraction, for a way to shift her focus. And so, she felt grateful for the dreams she had seen, dreams that came to her in her darkest moment and showed her a new path forward. They had helped her forget the bitterness, and they also promised the fulfillment of not only her own cherished wish but the long-cherished wish of the Ravencroft family. She did not know why such a dream had come to her, or why it appeared at such a perfect time, just when she had been at her lowest. Yet she had accepted it as though it were a beacon sent into the void, a light meant to guide her out of despair. But how would she react if she ever learned the truth? That the very person who had driven her into despair was also the one who unknowingly showed her the path out of it. Would she fall into despair once again? Or would it give rise to something else entirely? Or perhaps, she would never know at all. Only time would tell. Let us move. Melicia's voice broke the silence at last, carrying neither hesitation nor doubt. She had no fear of danger ahead, at least not if the dream she saw was to be believed. Everything she had experienced in it had proven true so far, and so she chose to trust in it, though deep inside her wariness still remained. That was why Naira was here with her, after all. Naira followed closely behind, her domain shifting and expanding as they moved forward. At one point she summoned her spear into her hand, ready to protect Melicia at the first sign of threat. Though her domain was already active, it would take her less than a heartbeat to transform it from a simple normal domain into her true domain. With that assurance, she felt at least somewhat less worried. As they walked across the black sands, leaving behind a trail of faint footsteps, the number of bones only grew denser. Soon, Naira caught sight of a dragon's corpse lying half-buried in the dunes. Its great skeletal wings spread wide as if it had fallen mid-flight. The sight sent a shudder down her spine, and her expression grew heavy with the weight of what it meant. She turned her gaze toward Melicia, hoping to find even a trace of fear or unease reflected in her companion's face. Yet instead of fear, she saw only a distant calm, as if Melicia's mind was elsewhere and the horrors around them no longer mattered. Is she truly relying on me, believing that I will protect her from anything? The thought warmed Naira's chest in an unexpected way, though at the same time it left her expression faintly sore. There was also the chance that Melicia's composure came not from trust in her, but simply from blind faith in the dream she had seen. Contradicting feelings indeed. After walking for some time, they eventually reached the end of the underground forbidden zone. In front of them stood a black obsidian wall made entirely of rock, stretching upward without end and blocking their path forward. It was an imposing sight, cold and absolute, offering no way through. "Miss, there is nothing here." Naira spoke with a calm smile, her voice betraying a hint of relief, as if she had truly hoped that this would be the end of their strange exploration. But Melicia shook her head softly and replied, "No, I just chose the wrong way. I must have been confused. We will just walk along the wall. This entire place is like a vast, hollow cave, almost like a vacuum. If we keep moving quickly, we should be able to circle the whole area in a single day." Naira tilted her head, listening closely as Melicia continued with steady conviction. "And when I say circle the whole place, I mean that you should carry me and run along the wall. My speed will only slow us down." Her words were spoken slowly and with clarity, each syllable falling into Naira's ears like droplets of water echoing in the silence. Naira understood at once. To her, it was not just a practical choice but also a reassuring one. If she carried Melicia on her back, she could escape far more easily should something unexpected happen in this eerie place. "All right, miss," she answered, her tone firm. With that, Naira began to run along the wall, carrying Melicia. She ran for what felt like an eternity, her body straining under the effort. The endless sprint drained her mana until exhaustion weighed on her more heavily than it had in a very long time. The reason was simple. There was no ambient mana in this place to replenish her strength, and at the same time she had to maintain her domain without pause, creating an artificial atmosphere so Melicia could stay alive. It was a heavy burden to carry both physically and magically, Yet even so she endured. Her reserves were vast, befitting someone of her rank, and despite her exhaustion she still held enough mana to fight or flee if danger arrived. Her persistence was not in vain. After countless stretches of empty wall broken only by scattered bones of abominations, something unusual finally caught their eyes. It looked at first like a hole in the wall. No, not a hole. Naira adjusted her path, moving diagonally away from the wall, and as the distance shifted their perspective, the truth revealed itself. What had seemed like a hollow break was not a hole at all, but a massive gate embedded within the wall itself. The gate was colossal, towering so high it seemed to scrape against the unseen ceiling of the cavern. Its sheer size made them appear small, insignificant in comparison. The illusion of a hole had only been caused by the stone walls curving slightly outward around the gate, concealing its presence until they came close enough. On its surface was carved the image of a phoenix, so lifelike and intricate that it seemed ready to burst from the stone at any moment. Its wings were spread wide in eternal majesty, its feathers detailed with such care that the illusion of movement lingered in the eye. The longer one looked, the stronger the feeling grew that in the next heartbeat the mighty phoenix would soar forth from the stone and devour them, a guardian of something sacred hidden beyond. But once again, it was only an illusion. Even so, as they approached, Malicia felt her heart begin to race. Her blood surged as though responding to a silent call, each beat quickening, echoing in her ears like a chant. Naira too felt the strange influence. Though she had no bloodline, a wave of energy stirred her spirit, filling her with exhilaration. It was not her body that answered, but her heart. For Naira, this was proof. The dream Malicia had spoken of was not fantasy. It was real. It was true by the gods. It was really true. Her chest tightened with joy and awe, and without meaning to she quickened her pace. Both of them arrived before the towering gate in what felt like a single breath. Standing before it, they could not help but be struck silent. Even though there was no living creature here, the presence that radiated from the phoenix carving was overwhelming. It was as though they were truly standing before the great phoenix itself. After a long moment, the awe began to settle, though traces of reverence still lingered in their eyes. To them, this was no ordinary sight. Neither of them had ever seen a true phoenix. The only knowledge they had came from stories, old records, and family tales passed down through generations of the Ravencroft. Now, even a carved likeness of one filled them with a deep and unshakable sense of wonder. "Now, what do we have to do, Mississippi?" Naira finally asked, her voice tinged with anticipation. Malicia remained silent for a while, her teeth lightly pressing against her lower lip. At last she answered in a quiet voice, "Nothing. I will just open the door." Naira frowned, raising a brow in confusion. "Do you have a key?" she asked. To this, Malicia stepped forward with calm determination and replied, "I am the key." "Well, I meant I could be the key." Malicia thought inwardly, her eyes reflecting a quiet certainty. In the dream there had been two ways shown to her, revealed as if someone wanted her to clearly understand both paths. The vision had felt intentional, almost as though the ancestors of their bloodline had decided to grace their children with guidance after watching how hopeless they had become. It was not simply chance. It was more like a final gift left behind for the lost descendants of the Phoenix. The first path was to pass the trial, which meant confronting the Guardian, the stone phoenix carved onto the massive gate. The other path was different, a way reserved only for the true bloodline of the king, the phoenix itself. "I just have to spill my blood on the door." She repeated the thought quietly in her heart, her steps carrying her closer. Without hesitation she lifted her hand and drew forth a drop of her own blood, letting it fall upon the red surface of the towering door. The stone seemed to stir instantly, glowing faintly like fire brought to life. The droplet was absorbed at once, vanishing into the carved patterns as if the door had been waiting for it. The moment her blood vanished into the stone, the entire gate shuddered. The moment the blood disappeared, the great door trembled, a deep shudder running through its massive frame. The vibration spread outward like a low rumble, echoing through the walls and making the ground itself quiver, as though the ancient gate had just awakened from a slumber that had lasted countless ages. Malicia instinctively stepped back, her heart thudding in her chest, as the gate slowly began to open inward. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and ashes drifted lazily through the air, disturbed after so many years. At some point, Naira silently appeared behind her, her gaze fixed on the growing darkness revealed behind the widening gap. When the gate finally stood open in its entirety, a sight unlike any other greeted them. Within that abyss, bright red flames suddenly ignited, brimming with life and devouring the shadows in an instant, their glow illuminating the ancient hall hidden within. The hall revealed itself in its full grandeur, and both Malicia and Naira drew sharp breaths, their chests tightening. In that moment, they felt everything at once: shock, fear, awe, dread, and even a flicker of happiness. Happiness, because Malicia realized she might truly have the chance to revive the bloodline of her family. And yet, shock, fear, awe, and dread overwhelmed them, because what stood before their eyes was no relic. It was the skeletal remains of a true phoenix. The massive structure stretched out like the frame of a fallen sky. The beak was sharp and regal, the claws long and curved with terrifying elegance, and the wide spread of its feathered bones looked as if it could once have covered the heavens themselves. Even in death, the skeleton radiated a presence that was impossible to ignore. An aura of pride, dignity, and overwhelming power pulsed faintly from the remains, spilling outward in invisible waves, though neither of them had yet set foot inside. The hall itself was strange, almost alien in its beauty. Marble floors lay covered in a thin layer of ashes, as though time itself had burned and left its remnants behind. The ceiling and walls glittered with red crystalline stones, frozen in jagged patterns like ice, yet each shard glowed faintly with heat. It felt less like a hall and more like stepping into a world of frozen fire, a place where ice burned and flames stood still. While Naira remained dazed by the sight, Malicia walked forward as if possessed. The dream she had received had only shown her the method to enter the gate, nothing beyond it. Yet here, standing before the remains of the phoenix, questions flooded her mind like a storm. Is this the corpse of the ancestor? She asked herself a question she already knew the answer to. Still, countless doubts swirled within her heart, each one without an answer. Who could possibly have been powerful enough to kill a phoenix? Who could have survived the devastating flames of Nirvana? Why had these bones not turned to ash, if the ancestor had truly fallen? Why did they still remain preserved in such a state? And if the ancestor died, who created this place? Was it built by the enemy, and if so, for what reason? No matter how she tried to piece it together, there were no answers, only silence. Pushing her curiosity aside, Malicia stood directly before the massive skeletal remains. Even in death, the phoenix looked forward, its skull angled with pride, as if refusing to bow to the world even after its fall. Slowly, almost reverently, she raised her hand, reaching out to touch the ancient bones. Behind her, Naira's eyes scanned the chamber with sharp caution. Her senses were muted after entering the darkness below, so she had to rely solely on her eyes, ears, and nose. Even then, her instincts screamed that this place was dangerous, at least to her. Her gaze shifted back to Malicia, who was now stretching her hand closer to the phoenix bones. Naira wanted to stop her, but deep inside she knew Malicia would not listen, no matter what she said. So instead, she silently watched, ready to act the moment something happened, while praying that nothing would. The instant Malicia's hand touched the cold surface of the bones, her body jolted violently. Heat surged through her veins, her blood racing with unnatural speed. Smoke began to rise from her clothes as unbearable heat consumed her. She tried to pull her hand away, but it was as though her flesh had been fused to the remains. Her garments started to burn, and then came the pain. It was unbearable, tearing through her nerves, and a scream ripped from her lips, raw and agonized. Naira's composure broke the moment she heard it, her eyes widening, her heart twisting. She moved instinctively, but before she could take a single step forward, a vast will descended upon her. The ground beneath her groaned as if pressed by an invisible mountain. She struggled to resist, her body trembling violently under the weight. Even for her, who had endured countless hardships, it was almost suffocating. Her knees buckled, forcing her down, and yet she kept her eyes on Melissia, whose screams only grew louder. By now her clothes had been burned away, and her skin itself was searing under the flames of power. Nyra's eyes turned crimson as fury and desperation swelled inside her, and she attempted to unleash her domain to fight back. But the moment her power surged, it was suppressed, crushed under the vast will pressing down on her. She strained her neck upward, forcing herself to look at the source, and what she saw above the skeletal remains made her very soul tremble. From the bones, a figure of a phoenix formed, not of flesh but of pure will and intent, its wings stretching wide as it gazed down with ancient, unyielding eyes. In that moment, realization struck her like lightning. It is the will of the great ancestor of the Ravencroft family. Her teeth clenched, her body shaking, but she did not look away. And all the while, the screams of Melissia echoed through the hall, growing sharper, louder, and more agonized with every passing second. Melissia was not faring well. Her body and soul were burning, and the pain she felt was beyond anything she could endure. After all, who in this world could ever think of pain as something pleasant, unless the person was a masochist? It hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. Her body was already half burned, her flesh peeling away as if consumed by invisible fire, and the pain had become blinding. At some point, she even lost her voice, her screams falling silent. Her throat could no longer carry sound, and then, as though her existence itself was being erased, her body crumbled into dust. At that same moment, the ancient phoenix bones began to disintegrate, breaking apart into fine ashes. Slowly but surely, those ashes drifted and surrounded the remains of Melissia, merging with her own. Then, as though a storm of ash had erupted, the two piles intertwined, glowing with an otherworldly brilliance. The storm of ashes grew larger, fiercer, and more terrifying with every passing heartbeat. The frozen flames on the ceiling and walls were sucked into the vortex, drawn into its center, until a blinding radiance burst forth and flames devoured everything. Bright red, burning yellow, molten orange, and dazzling white flames intertwined like threads of fate, sweeping through the hall. Yet, despite the inferno, nothing was truly consumed. Not even Nyra was touched by the fire, though she stood right in its heart, watching in awe. "You can do this, little sister." Her fists clenched tightly as she whispered her prayer, hoping desperately for Melissia's success. Time passed, and after several agonizing minutes, the raging flames began to condense. They slowly twisted into a crown, forged from fire and molten red steel. It radiated authority, dignity, and a sovereign majesty, like something meant only for those who could command the heavens. At that instant, the oppressive power crushing Nyra vanished. The image of the phoenix faded, its vast will absorbed into the crown itself. And in the very next breath, from the flames of nirvana, a figure emerged. A flawless body slowly took form, skin pale and smooth like porcelain, eyes glowing with the brilliance of burning rubies, and hair cascading in waves of crimson fire. She was beautiful beyond reason, mesmerizing and soul-stealing, a being who seemed both divine and untouchable. Her entire demeanor had changed. The depressed, untidy, and broken version of Melissia was gone, replaced by a figure that seemed utterly flawless, as though every imperfection had been burned away in the flames. Melissia had been reborn. The Flame Empress had awakened. Albeit, for now, she was still a weak shadow when compared to the overwhelming figure described in the original novel. Nyra looked at Melissia with wide eyes, her heart beating loudly against her chest. Her body trembled as tears spilled from her eyes, blurring her vision, and in a voice that quivered with relief, she muttered, You succeeded. Hey readers, how's life? Breathing? Good? because it'd be kinda terrifying if ghosts were reading this. Anyway, we've officially hit 250 chapters. Crazy, right? From chapter 1 to here, it's been one heck of a ride, and I'm honestly so grateful to all of you who stuck around, even with my questionable at times writing skills. Though hey, I think I'd at least pass a writing exam if I ever gave one. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you for reading and spending your precious time here. If you're still enjoying the story, dropping some power stones would mean the world. You might think it doesn't matter, but trust me, it really does. Also, big news. I'm planning a mass release soon. How many chapters? At least 10, maybe even 15. I won't give false promises, but I'll try my best. Target date? September 1st. If anything shifts by a day or two, I'll let you know. Once again, thank you for all the love and support. Let's keep going strong. Smash those power stones and unlock the power of runes. Feels nice. Melissia thought as she walked back towards her dorm room, having just finished her second exam. It had gone splendidly, far better than she had expected. Moreover, Melissia's mood was peaceful, almost unnaturally so. Her mind was calm, free of all traces of sadness, depression, or self-doubt. There was nothing but positivity within her, overflowing endlessly as though no darkness could ever taint it again. That was not all. Her body itself brimmed with power, so much so that she felt as if she could shatter mountains with her bare hands. Of course, that was only an illusion born from her drastic increase in physical strength, but it was not far from reality either. Breaking a massive boulder or two would hardly be difficult for her now, though everyone would probably faint if I actually did that. The changes brought forth by her bloodline were not limited to her personality. Her entire being had shifted to the point that no one would believe she was the same Melissia they had once known. She had no intention of revealing everything, however, and preferred to keep it hidden. Her parents were the only ones she had told. Both her father and mother had been elated beyond words, so much so that they wanted her to abandon the academy and come home at once. Yet she had chosen to remain, determined to complete her exams and only return once the holidays began, because she did not want to leave. That was her will, firm and unshakable. The awakening of her bloodline had not only granted her strength but had also sharpened her maturity and decision-making. Though the change in class was quite a surprise. Everyone believed that once an individual's class was determined, it could never change. But reality was different. A class could evolve into a stronger form, and in extremely rare cases it could even change entirely. Such evolution required hidden conditions that not every class possessed. No clear pattern had ever been found to explain which classes could evolve or what was needed, but it was observed that only classes with untapped potential could awaken into something greater. Just like her own Fire Mage class, which had now evolved into a unique class, Flame Empress. A class unlike any other in the entire world. It granted her complete immunity to fire and absolute dominion over it. As long as her opponent was only a rank above her, she could suppress any being who wielded fire, no matter their talent or mastery. Even more profound than her new class, however, was the transformation of her very existence. She was no longer entirely human. She had become half human and half phoenix. And as she climbed the ranks, her humanity would gradually fade away, until at last nothing remained and she was reborn as a true phoenix. And the most extraordinary change of all. I still can't believe I awakened the eternal flames. Even now, the thought sent shivers down her spine. The eternal flames, said to be everlasting, were the flames of rebirth and the flames of destruction, carrying with them both creation and ruin. She had learned that the region called the Forbidden Zone, the Land of Ashes, was nothing more than a side effect of the Crown of Ember's presence. The crown unconsciously devoured mana, oxygen, and even the smallest particles in the air as a form of defense, leaving behind a barren wasteland. The place where she and Naira had gone had been a secret base of the Ravencroft family, built in ancient times as a last refuge. The crown was linked to it, and so, when the third head of the Ravencroft family perished, his body had been drawn into the base and preserved by the crown's power. Even now, Malicia could not fully control or comprehend the might of the crown. What she knew for certain was that as her rank grew and her phoenix bloodline matured, her bond with the crown would deepen, granting her greater and greater command over its power. That was the sum of all the changes she had experienced in these past days. And yet, she was still a little disappointed. Deep inside, she believed, or at least she hoped, that there was still more awaiting her. Well, there was one thing: her thoughts about Ash. They were quite conflicting. She thought her feelings for Ash would eventually vanish, or at the very least, she wished for them to fade. But instead of disappearing, they only grew stronger, multiplying until they nearly blinded her. The more she tried to suppress them, the more fiercely they burned, leaving her heart restless and unwilling to let go. But she also knew the truth. Ash was already taken. He had Alicia. It was nothing more than a one-sided love on her part. But there was nothing she could do. One part of her wanted to curse her fate and the heart that had chosen so foolishly, while another part clung to those feelings as if they were the only thing keeping her alive. It was a cruel contradiction, and it made her chest ache in ways she could not put into words. Shaking her thoughts away, Malicia increased her pace. Her throat felt unbearably hot, as if fire still lingered inside her, and she found herself craving something cold, anything that could soothe the burning within. Now then, what flavor should I try today? If there was one other change in her, it was her sudden and growing fondness for ice cream. She had already been fond of teddy bears, but this new obsession was something she could not have predicted. It was ironic, almost laughable. Being immune to fire, her heart now craved the coolness of frozen sweetness. Paradox, perhaps, or maybe hypocrisy. Right now, she found herself stuck in a dilemma, unable to decide which shop to go to. Darn it, I'll just eat every single one. Meanwhile, Ash followed her for quite a while, and as he saw her eating large amounts of ice cream and drinking one cold beverage after another, in her tidy and beautiful appearance, he felt an immense sense of relief rise within him. Looks like she succeeded. Ash smiled lightly, then turned around and walked away. He was genuinely glad that everything had worked out. Even in the novel, she had developed a deep fondness for cold food after awakening her bloodline, and seeing it here was not surprising. Rather, it was an undeniable sign that she had succeeded. The thought of someone suffering because of him was something he could never bear. Ash himself had gone through such torment before, and he knew very well just how horrifying it could be. He never wished to experience it again, nor did he want anyone else to suffer such pain because of his existence. So he was glad that this time he had been able to cleanse that turmoil from someone else. He chose not to appear before her, keeping himself out of her sight, unwilling to stir memories that might trouble her heart again. Time passed, and within a few days, the second exam had concluded for everyone in the academy. Before long, the day of the third exam finally arrived. "Are you nervous?" Ash asked in a calm voice. Alicia turned to him after hearing his question, her eyes meeting his. "Of course, but not that much," she replied with a faint smile. Ash raised his eyebrows slightly. Why so? It was surprising to him that Alicia was not more nervous, especially since the third and final exam was about to begin. The academy had placed great importance on this stage, preparing more extensively than before, with even more teachers present to oversee it. They were wary of sudden gate breaks and unexpected attacks, yet most of the students carried the same thought in their minds. If there was truly danger, then why would the academy still conduct the exam? The answer was simple. It was to train the younger generation, to teach them that nothing should be allowed to hinder their path. Growth was never meant to be safe or easy, for it always came hand in hand with danger. I have trained as much as I could during the past month, and since it is an academy exam, everything should be fine. I am only hoping that we get selected into the same team. Although she spoke with confidence, there was a subtle edge of nervousness in her voice that could not be hidden. Ash smiled gently and said, "Don't worry. Nothing will happen. But if something does happen, just do what I told you before, and everything will turn out all right." He held her hands firmly, the warmth of his touch spreading into her skin. Alicia felt her heartbeat steadying, her unease melting away. His voice, calm and assured, seemed to carry a strange power, one that wrapped around her like a quiet embrace and eased her restless heart. Just then, a loud voice echoed across the vast arena field where they stood, silencing all chatter and drawing every gaze toward the stage. In the huge grounds of the Colosseum, thousands of students were present, talking and laughing among themselves. Various large screens floated above the Colosseum, showing shifting images so that everyone could see clearly what was happening in the arena. The Colosseum seats were also being filled by students from the other sections and years, since no one wished to miss such an entertaining event. Although the test was said to last a week, with two teams competing against each other, sometimes it ended much earlier because of the unexpected elimination of all members from a team or due to other sudden factors. That unpredictability made the event even more exciting. Thus, the atmosphere was alive with murmurs, with everyone discussing one thing or another, speculating about who might shine and who might fall. Just then, a loud voice cut through the murmuring, making the entire arena fall silent in an instant. "Attention, everyone!" Although the voice was powerful, it carried a tone that felt strangely familiar. And when they realized who it belonged to, every student shuddered for a brief second. "Instructor Elva," Ash thought, raising his eyes toward the beautiful figure floating above the Colosseum. Her presence dominated the sky, and her image was also projected onto the enormous screens so that even those seated far away could see her clearly. She stood tall, her hands clasped neatly behind her back, with an unusual grin playing on her lips. The dress she wore was almost too tight, accentuating her elegant yet dangerous aura. She looked utterly mesmerizing, and a deep silence settled across the Colosseum as if everyone was holding their breath. Almost every male student present was unable to take their eyes off her, staring without even blinking. With her grin still in place, Elva's voice rang out again, carrying both authority and charm. "The third exam will begin shortly. As you all know, this trial is designed to test how well you can cooperate with others, how you manage your resources, and how you use your strength to achieve your goals." She paused slightly, her eyes sweeping over the gathered students, as though weighing each of them with a glance before continuing. "Let me make this clear. If anyone believes they can act alone, discarding their teammates and relying solely on themselves, then they will fail. And failing this third exam does not mean another chance. It means expulsion from the academy. Remember this, because this exam carries the greatest weight in your overall marks." Her words carried a sharpness that pressed down on the students, erasing the last traces of casual chatter. Then, with a playful tilt of her head, Elva's grin grew a little wider. "Now, before we move on to the contents of the exam, we must first create the teams." At her words, the image on the screens shifted, revealing a massive roulette-like machine spinning rapidly, with the faces of countless students flashing across it. "Let the random team selection begin," Elva declared in an excited voice that seemed to carry a spark of personal enjoyment. It was clear to everyone that she was more thrilled than the students themselves. She liked this part far too much, because very soon she would have the pleasure of watching an unpredictable and entertaining show unfold before her. The roulette spun quickly, flashing names across the screens before announcing each team. One after another, groups were formed, and the chosen students were directed to move to specially prepared areas where their teammates would gather. Time passed, and the roulette continued its work, each announcement raising the anticipation within the Colosseum. Then, finally, a familiar set of names appeared on the screen. Team 13, Irvin Earthrend, Erinder Frostbane, Varric Emberfall, Fenric Duskbane, Orin Bloodfang. Irvin moved toward the area designated for Team 13, and just like that, students began to separate one by one, each walking toward their assigned spots as the roulette continued spinning. The vast arena slowly filled with clusters of teams, order forming out of the initial chaos, until Team 34, Corindrel, Varric Ashen, Luthen Marrik, Alicia Moonglow, Alina Hearth. The moment Alicia's name appeared on the screen, Ash glanced at her instinctively. She was carefully studying the list of names, her gaze lingering on the unfamiliar faces of her new teammates, and after a moment, he shifted his eyes to them as well. 3 were boys while 1 was a girl. Corin and Luthen were from Class 1D and 1E, respectively, while Varric belonged to Class 1A and Alina to Class 1C. Other than this brief introduction, nothing else about them was provided. "All the best," Ash said quietly. "You two will see each other soon." Alicia gave him a small smile before turning away. With light steps, she made her way toward the area assigned to Team 34 on the wide Coliseum grounds, her figure gradually blending into the steady movement of students around her. Unknown to her, something invisible and perfectly camouflaged broke away and followed silently. "Stay with her," Ash whispered inwardly. "Mama." The serpent slithered unseen after Alicia, unnoticed by anyone, carrying Ash's will. He was not planning anything, merely taking precautions. To him, danger was never a distant possibility but an ever-present threat, and so paranoia had long become his habit. The roulette on the screen spun again, pulling Ash's focus back as more names flashed across. Teams continued forming at a rapid pace. Team 45, Team 56, Team 78, Team 90, Team 123, Team 145, Team 156, and finally Team 199. One after another, groups filled the arena until the last team was called, Team 200. But Ash's name had never appeared. By then, the entire arena was filled with students standing beside their groups near the boundary of the Coliseum. Yet only 2 figures remained without a team standing in the middle: Ash and Ray. Ray stood at a distance, his brows drawn in confusion, his eyes fixed on the screen as if expecting his name to appear even now. When he finally looked away and turned toward Ash, their eyes met for the briefest moment, a coincidence of timing. Yet that accidental meeting of gazes carried an eerie weight in the silence, making the emptiness of the Coliseum feel heavier than before. What is she planning now? Ash's gaze lingered on Ray, but his thoughts churned. He could not be certain of Elva's true intentions, but the reason itself was not hard to grasp. It was simple, really. They were just too powerful. Oh! You all must be confused why Ash Byrne and Ray Dawson did not appear in any team. The thing is, as you know, there are 1,002 students in the first year, so in order to balance the number of people in each group, I had to remove 2 students. And who would be the better choice? Other than the 2 strongest among you. Don't you all think so? She asked this lightly, tilting her head in a playful manner, but no one dared to respond. Instead, the entire arena fell into silence, students averting their gazes, as if hoping not to be singled out. As if that was the only reason she did this, Ash scoffed inwardly. It was not that he held a grudge against Ray. After all, they had once traveled together to the dwarf continent. Their teamwork had not been flawless, but it was decent enough that they could coordinate if the situation demanded it. Though truthfully, Ash wanted no such thing. What if he is bad luck? Ash had ventured on countless expeditions, yet never once had he witnessed the loss of innocent lives. However, the single time he joined forces with Ray, an entire city was wiped off the map. Coincidence or not, Ash could not shake off the thought, and so he kept searching for reasons to avoid being paired with him. As both of your powers far exceed the other 1,000 students, there will be a separate test prepared exclusively for you both. Elva finally continued, her tone firm and serious. Though it will not be a normal exam. You are already strong enough that such a test holds little meaning for you. For a moment, her voice carried the weight of command, but in the very next breath, her seriousness melted away and a mischievous smile spread across her lips. Still, a test is a test. The one prepared for you will be far more difficult and demanding than what the others will face. Yet even so, if you fail, it will not count as failure. Simply pass with the minimum required marks, and that will be enough. Her words lingered in the air before she turned her eyes directly toward Ash. A quiet giggle escaped her lips, the kind that felt deliberately placed to provoke. But, if someone was aiming to secure first place in the academy exams, then I would suggest you try your very best to complete the trial that has been assigned to you both. Ash clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he cursed in silence. I knew it. That damn old fossil would never let things be simple for me. Bastard. I could have just used the teleportation. Ash grumbled inwardly, staring out from the window of the armored military vehicle. It was a machine built for war, designed to carry entire units of soldiers together, but in the back compartment, there were only 2 passengers, Ash and Ray. The driver sat separated at the front, focused solely on the road that cut deeper into the wild forest. Outside, the landscape was passing in a blur. Dense trees stretched endlessly, their crowns woven so tightly that little light filtered through, and the undergrowth was alive with shifting shadows. Strange birds rose startled at the sound of the vehicle, and the thick foliage was swallowed by distance the moment it appeared. I am glad I left Snow with Alicia. The thought made his chest feel lighter. With their unique soul bond, he could reach Snow in an instant, no matter the distance, and they could communicate across vast stretches of land as if standing side by side. That power had not come overnight. It was the product of countless experiments Ash had conducted, slowly unraveling both Snow's abilities and his own. Pulling his gaze back inside, Ash examined the interior of the vehicle. The walls were layered with thick steel plates that carried the smell of oil and iron, and the windows were fitted with durable glass that distorted the view of the forest. 2 long benches stretched along either side, padded with rough leather stitched in military green and brown. He and Ray sat opposite each other, close enough that avoiding eye contact was impossible. Ray was already staring at him, irritated by that unwavering gaze. Ash frowned and asked in a flat tone, "What?" Ray did not answer immediately. His silence stretched, heavy and sharp, until he finally spoke with a voice that carried a restrained fury. "You look completely fine. Did you seriously forget about those dead people?" "Ah, no. Is he really going to give me a lecture about humanity right now?" Ash felt the irritation rising, which was unusual for him, since he was not easily provoked. Still, he kept his composure and answered evenly, though his words carried a sting. "Yeah, my mentality is not that of a child, so I recovered quickly. But hearing that question makes me think that you have not recovered." A teasing smile formed on his lips as he finished, deliberately pushing at Ray's nerves. A vein throbbed on Ray's forehead as he clenched his teeth. "I am not a kid. You are a kid. Shut up. Whose side are you even on?" At those words, Etheris went quiet. Ash leaned forward slightly, his tone rising just enough to sound provoking. "Oh no, you are. Technically, physically, and even mentally too." Ray's anger reached its limit, but instead of snapping back, he activated Null Mind. In an instant, all fury drained away, leaving his expression unervingly calm, though the price was the steady drain of his mana. Closing his eyes, he slipped into meditation, shutting Ash out entirely. Seeing Ray turn silent so suddenly, Ash clicked his tongue in mild frustration. He leaned back on the soft bench, letting his head tilt toward the ceiling of the armored compartment, and closed his eyes. His mind drifted to the trial they had been assigned, thoughts circling around what awaited them once this vehicle stopped. A few hours ago. "So, how are you feeling?" Hearing the teasing tone in Instructor Elva's voice, Ash gritted his teeth and muttered, "Don't put salt on my wounds." But her response wasn't words. A melodic giggle escaped her lips, light and unrestrained, making Ash's chest tighten for a second. His gaze wavered, slightly dazed by the sudden softness in her expression. Damn, was she always this expressive? I don't think so. Is this another thing I changed? He forced himself to avert his eyes from her graceful figure, trying not to blush. Nature has created beautiful things, and as a man, I should appreciate them all. But my heart belongs to Alicia alone. Yeah. Meanwhile, Ray, sitting next to him, flushed visibly and turned his head to the side, refusing to meet Elva's eyes. TSK. No matter the era, some things never change. Shut up. Etheris spoke in Ray's mind, only to receive the usual response of annoyance. Elva's laughter finally faded, her expression returning to normal as she wiped the corner of her eye. "It's funny to see you like this. I heard about a boy who openly spoke against the Saints just a few months ago, and now that same boy is being toyed with by one." This time, Ash did not react with words. He only met her gaze with eyes that had turned noticeably colder, his silence sharper than a retort. Once she was satisfied with her teasing, Elva's demeanor shifted. She picked up a paper from the desk, her playful expression vanishing as a serious one took its place. Glancing over the details written there, she lifted her eyes, studying Ash and Ray one after the other. A quiet sigh escaped her lips. "Well, jokes aside, the task you are about to undertake is quite dangerous." Both Ash and Ray leaned forward slightly, their attention sharpening at once. Ash in particular felt his nerves stir with unease. This was an event he did not recall from the novel, which meant it was one of the changes he desperately needed to understand. But, knowing you two possess unusually strong defenses and resistance, the task should be manageable. At least, if nothing unexpected happens. Her tone carried a subtle warning. A large number of dungeons have begun appearing all across the world, creating havoc everywhere. For now, we don't need to concern ourselves with the entire world, only our continent. Still, those awakened from associations, guilds, and prominent families have already been dispatched in large numbers. Our manpower here is stretched thin. But she lifted her eyes from the paper, fixing them firmly on both of them. "We discovered 2 first-years whose strength is equal to, or perhaps even greater than, some of our more experienced fighters. So, what do you think the association decided?" Ray answered almost instantly. "To use us to clear dungeons." Elva chuckled lightly. "Use you? What are you, tools?" "Don't think of it like that. Rather than use, deploying would be the correct word. You will be rewarded as well, apart from receiving full marks in your exams. You will also earn military credits, which, as you know, are extremely valuable." "Well, if it includes that, then I suppose it's fine." Military points were far different from academic points. Academic points could only be used inside the academy for purchases, but military points opened access to far greater things. With them, one could buy weapons, rare knowledge, combat techniques, or even the experiences of powerful figures within the military. The sheer scope of possibilities made them priceless. Although the credits themselves carried no inherent value, what they could grant was enough to silence Ash for the moment. Still, a faint sense of dissatisfaction lingered. "I think we should receive more for this," Ash finally voiced. "If the task is truly as dangerous as you say." Elva's smile deepened, and Ash immediately felt a bad premonition stir in his chest. "Of course. Which is why, once you complete the task, both of you will be granted a special privilege. You'll be allowed to skip any class you wish and seek guidance from anyone in the academy without restriction. You'll be free to train however you like, and no one will disturb you. Isn't it fascinating? Damn you, old geezer. I asked for privileges, and now you are extending them to your disciple as well." Talk about blatant favoritism. Although Ash was annoyed, he swallowed his irritation and forced his voice steady. "Please, tell us our task." "Oh, right." Elva placed the paper down. "There is an area deep within the untamed forest where the military was attempting to establish a base. But unexpectedly, 50 gates appeared in the clearing. All of them broke at once, flooding the area with monsters. The gates were ranked from C to A. I believe you can handle them without much trouble." The untamed forest was the same area that covered 60% of the human domain and was not claimed by the humans. Many dangers dwell there, and many other things as well. Her eyes grew sharper. The A-rank monsters are few, but the B and C ranks are numerous. Roughly 1,000 in total, according to our estimation. Strangely enough, they are not fighting each other, which makes the situation even more unusual. That clearing has been sealed off with a powerful artifact to cage the monsters within. Your task is simple. Eliminate everything inside and claim the area. She leaned back slightly. Simple, right? Elva finished speaking, her gaze resting firmly on the two of them. Sigh, so it's only monster killing. That should be simple enough. With a faint smile, Ash opened his mouth to speak, but Ray's voice rang out faster. "Yes, miss." Ash frowned, replying a moment later with less enthusiasm. "Of course. Bastard. Are you still thinking about those things?" Hearing Ethery's voice in his mind, Ray replied quietly. "Yeah." "Do you believe what he said?" "I don't think he had any reason to lie to me." Ray was thinking about the answers he had received from Ash, the ones about why his parents had died, why his village was attacked by demons, and who the demon was that had taken everything from him. It had all happened just a day after they returned from the Dwarven continent. Standing near the edge of the glistening lake, both Ash and Ray gazed at the horizon where the evening sun was dipping low, its golden light spilling across the water and staining the sky in hues of orange and crimson. The tranquil scenery seemed almost wasted on the two of them. "I should be here with Alicia, but instead I am watching this beautiful sunset with a damn boy." Ash glanced sideways at Ray, irritation prickling under his skin. "Just ask what you want to know already. I have many other things to do," Ash said, his voice slightly edged with impatience. Ray turned his eyes from the lake and fixed them on Ash. "Who was the demon that killed my parents? What is his name? And where can I find him? So, this is the first thing you are going to ask?" "Ha!" Ash looked at Ray with an unamused expression. He had always known that Ray carried vengeance deep in his heart, and this question only confirmed it. The demon who killed your parents was the most loyal and most powerful being under the Demon King. He was second in command, the strongest right hand of that wretched throne. Hearing this, Ray's pupils dilated and his hands clenched tight at his sides. "As for his name, it is Asgorth, and you will meet him only when you face the Demon King himself." Next question. Although Ray's heart was already burning with rage after hearing the name of his parents' killer, he forced himself to continue. He needed to know more. "Then tell me why my village was attacked. Why did my parents have to die? Why was I the only one left alive?" This time his voice was heavy, trembling as though the words themselves were scraping his throat raw. It felt as if he had to squeeze his very heart to bring the questions out. Ash did not answer right away, and when he finally spoke, his tone was calm, almost casual, though the truth he revealed carried a weight that could crush. "It all began because of a rune, or rather what was mistaken for one. Your family, in fact your entire village, had been entrusted with guarding an artifact. Somehow, the Demon King caught its trace and became convinced it was a rune, so he sent his strongest servant to claim it. But in truth, it was never a rune. It was only a powerful artifact sealed away, though its strength was second only to that of a rune. And this incident had become quite a headache for Ray in the novel too. Your parents died because they chose to protect the artifact, but even more than that, they died because they wanted to protect their only child, you." Ray's body shuddered violently at those words. "Your parents were powerful, Ray. If they wished, they could have taken the artifact and fled. The descent of that demon was only temporary. The first time demons had set foot into this realm, and it would have ended soon after. They had the chance to escape, yet they stayed and sacrificed themselves, all so their child could live. And you survived. Because it was fate, I suppose." Ash paused, his eyes drifting back to the lake. "So do not blame yourself. At least try not to." He kicked a small stone into the lake, watching it skip across the surface a few times before finally sinking beneath the rippling water. On the other hand, Ray was left frozen by the revelations. The truth crashed against him like waves that he could not stand against, and before he realized it, tears spilled down his cheeks. I. Because of me, they died. It was my fault, they died. Because of me. His broken muttering grew louder, until Ash could clearly hear every word. Ray slumped onto a bench nearby, covering his face with trembling hands as sobs racked his body. Ash looked away. He was not good at consoling others, and situations like this only made him feel awkward. His hands shifted in and out of his pockets. His arms crossed and uncrossed as he shifted uncomfortably while listening to Ray's sobs. At one point, his patience snapped, and his voice grew sharp. "Will you stop crying already? How is that your fault? You should be grateful that you're alive because of your parents' sacrifice. Instead of wasting their gift with tears, get strong enough to avenge them. Crying will give you nothing. Even then, Ray did not respond, his grief drowning out everything else. Ash grew more frustrated, and eventually, without saying another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Ray behind in his sorrow. Present. Screech! The military vehicle came to a sudden halt, and the sharp sound of the brakes echoed across the camp. Ash opened his eyes at once, his expression calm, and without a moment's hesitation, he teleported outside. Using the doors felt pointless when there was a quicker way. Let's see. His gaze swept across the surroundings. The place was not particularly large, just a small military camp tucked away in an open clearing. A few canvas tents were pitched in uneven rows, their fabric shifting with the passing wind. Soldiers were moving about quietly, each of them busy with their own tasks, though a few glanced curiously at Ash before quickly turning away. The driver, who had brought them here, stepped out from the vehicle and immediately signaled with his hand. His expression was stiff and formal, leaving little room for questions. Ash began walking toward him, and a moment later Ray emerged as well, quickly catching up to his side. They followed in silence, the crunch of gravel beneath their boots filling the quiet air. Eventually, the driver led them to the very center of the camp, where a much larger tent stood apart from the others. Its size and placement alone marked its importance. The driver stopped, lifted the flap of the tent, and gave a simple gesture, wordlessly instructing them to enter. The moment Ash and Ray stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. It felt as though they had crossed into another dimension entirely. The space within stretched far beyond what was possible for a tent of that size, the interior easily 10 times larger than what they had seen from the outside. At the center stood a wide wooden table, and gathered around it were 5 people. Ash's eyes scanned them one by one. None of the faces were familiar to him, but there was little difficulty in discerning their positions. The man seated at the head of the table carried an overwhelming presence. A deep scar cut across his face, and one of his eyes was missing, yet his very posture exuded authority. Even without an introduction, it was clear that this man was a major, seeing the badges on his chest. The others were 3 men and 1 woman, all middle-aged, their expressions steady and their gazes sharp. From the way they carried themselves, Ash could tell they were most likely captains who served directly under the major. Ash and Ray advanced toward the table, their steps measured and deliberate. When they came close enough, both of them bowed in unison, their movements smooth and practiced, as if this greeting had been ingrained into them through repetition. Greetings. I am Ash Byrne. And I am Ray Dawson. They introduced themselves in turn and lifted their heads, their gazes calm and unwavering. The tent fell into a heavy silence after their words. The captains exchanged uncertain glances, some wearing frowns that spoke their doubts openly, while others kept their expressions carefully guarded, as though unwilling to reveal what they truly thought. The man seated at the head of the table looked at both of them. His single eye glimmered with a sharp light beneath the dim lanterns, and the scar carved across his face tightened as his jaw moved. Ash and Ray. His voice was steady and deep, each word carrying the weight of command and discipline. I am Major Draven Kale. The ones beside me are Captain Oren Valtor, Captain Selric Dawnfall, Captain Marvin Holt, and Captain Lyra Vera. Each of the captains gave a short nod at the introduction, but none of their expressions carried warmth. If anything, their silence and the subtle tension in their eyes made it clear that their doubts remained firmly in place. It was Captain Oren who finally broke the quiet. His voice was blunt, his words lacking restraint. Major, with all due respect, these are still children. The association sending them here makes no sense at all. This is not some academy exercise that can be used for training. This is a war against monsters. Captain Selric adjusted the cuffs of his uniform with measured precision before speaking. His gaze lingered on Ash and Ray, narrowing in open skepticism. I share the same thought. To send untested students into a battlefield of this scale is reckless at best, and if I may speak plainly, It is cruel. Captain Lyra leaned back slightly, her arms folding across her chest. Her sharp gaze cut through the air, settling on Ash and Ray, as if she intended to uncover every weakness hidden within them. Do you truly expect them to stand against what we face here? Even experienced soldiers fall before these creatures, yet you ask us to believe that 2 young students will be different. What exactly can they do? The last to speak was Captain Marvin. His voice was quieter than the others, yet it carried the weight of a heavy stone being dropped into still water. Major, forgive me, but is this truly the will of the association? Or is this the result of desperation? The questions hung in the air, lingering without answer. Doubt filled the tent like a suffocating fog, pressing down on everyone present. Major Draven remained silent through it all, his single eye never leaving Ash and Ray. He listened without interruption, his expression unchanging, until the last voice faded away. Then he slowly straightened in his chair and placed his hand firmly upon the table. The sharp sound cut through the room like a strike, forcing silence. They are here because the association has judged them worthy, Draven said. His tone was calm, yet each word was like iron, firm and impossible to bend. And I trust that judgment. Until proven otherwise, they are not children. They are soldiers, and they will stand beside us. The captains exchanged no further words, yet the unease in their eyes had not disappeared. Their silence was not agreement, only restraint. Draven's face darkened as his voice deepened. Now, to the matter at hand. 50 dungeons broke within the span of a single day. From every one of them, monsters poured into the world. We fought them, we bled, and we managed to contain them, but not destroy them. He leaned forward slightly, his one eye narrowing with intensity. Over 1,000 creatures are now caged in this sector. Their ranks range from C to A, and with each day that passes they grow more restless. Containment will not last forever. If those cages are broken, the devastation that follows cannot be stopped. The weight of his words pressed into the room like an invisible force, heavy and unrelenting, making the air itself feel thick to breathe. That is why you are here, Draven continued, his voice sharpening with steel-like certainty. Together we will eliminate every last one of them. Not a single monster will remain. Only then can this land finally draw breath again. So, it's starting, huh? The strategy meeting. Though honestly, I don't think we will need their plans. Still, I need to know what kind of creatures the dungeons have released. Ash's eyes drifted across the table, his expression calm, but his mind sharp with anticipation. In the deeper region of the untamed forest, near a wide clearing that was covered in ever-changing and ever-moving mist, there stood a small temporary military base. The camp itself was quiet, but the air carried a heavy tension. Inside the central tent of that base, a meeting was currently taking place. We can just use LH-976 to blast that whole area, Captain Selrick suggested, his tone sharp and decisive, as if he had already made up his mind. That suggestion, however, was immediately rejected by Captain Lyra. No can do, she said firmly, her expression turning stern. You know very well that the power behind that bomb is too much. Using it here will not just kill the monsters. It will create even more havoc and disturbance, and the surrounding space will only become more unstable. Her words left a chill in the air, and then she asked quietly, "What will you do if more dungeons appear because of that?" A heavy silence fell across the tent, everyone understanding the weight of her question, but having no answer to give. Captain Selrick frowned deeply, his eyes narrowing in frustration. So what do you think we should do then? Do not tell me you want to face over 1,000 monsters with just the 5 of us and 2 kids. Captain Lyra gave a short, cold snort before replying. Of course not. What I am saying is... What are they saying? Did we not receive instructions that only Ray and I have to clear the monsters? Are we really going to be getting help? Ash listened in silence, his mind tangled in confusion, but he did not want to interrupt their conversation. We can use the mist as our advantage, Lyra continued, her tone calm yet certain. We can lure them out and kill them slowly, one by one. We take out the strongest first, then the next strongest, and like that we can gradually thin their numbers until all of them are cleared. She leaned back slightly, then added with confidence. As for the problem of finding anyone in the mist, you can leave that to me. I can guide everyone without fail. After saying this, she shifted in her seat and turned her eyes toward the Major, silently asking for his decision. Ash was just about to speak, thinking this was the perfect moment to raise his question. But before he could open his mouth, someone else spoke up. "Sorry for interfering in the middle of your talk," Ray said suddenly, his voice making everyone pause and look directly at him. His face was calm, but his words carried a trace of doubt. "But we were told that the two of us had to clear the monsters that were caged, without any help. It was explained clearly that this was part of our exam." Ash let out a small sigh as he saw how the others were staring at Ray. Their expressions were not of understanding but of disbelief, as if Ray had just spoken nonsense in front of them. They were not even informed. What exactly is the association doing? It was clear from their reactions that no one had told them that Ash and Ray were expected to handle this task alone. Seeing that Ray was not getting any reply, Ash spoke in his place. "You can contact your superior and confirm it, if you do not believe us." The Major gave both of them a deep look, his expression unreadable, but without saying anything, he began contacting his superior through his communicator. While he was busy with that, Captain Lyra, who was sitting next to Ash, leaned closer and spoke in a low voice so that only he could hear. "Tell me, boy, did you two offend someone important?" Ash looked at her, genuinely confused, and answered, "I do not think so." "Then why were you two sent here to die?" "I cannot make sense of this," Lyra muttered, her face showing disbelief as she leaned back in her chair and shook her head slowly. Ash suddenly remembered something and leaned forward, his lips curling faintly as he whispered, "I suppose I did offend all 7 saints a few months ago. I even cursed them to their faces, and none of them were able to do anything about it." Captain Lyra's face turned pale in an instant, her eyes trembling slightly as she stared at him, completely unsure if he was joking or serious. Ash, on the other hand, leaned back into his seat with a slight smile lingering on his lips. Whether it was the truth or a lie, Lyra could not tell, nor did she want to. She had no wish to be tied to someone who would dare to speak like that about the saints in person. Even if it was not true, in her mind Ash was still a madman, because only a madman would say something like that so casually. Captains were considered equal to peak expert rank, while a major stood on the level of a master rank. Speaking of the Major, he did not look well at all. His remaining eye was wide with shock, trembling slightly as he lowered the communication device from his ear. Even his hands shook, betraying the emotions he was struggling to contain. All the captains exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions growing heavier by the second. It was not difficult to guess the reason for their Major's shaken state. "It's true," Major Draven muttered in a voice that wavered like an unsteady flame. "It's true. The association has ordered that both of them handle everything alone. Our job is only to make sure none of the beasts escape. Nothing more." A silence fell across the tent, a silence thick with disbelief. "Crazy, crazy. Everyone has gone mad. Who in their right mind sends children to their deaths? I cannot even begin to understand it," Captain Marvin cursed, his tone full of suppressed anger. The other 3 captains were no better. Their faces were pale, their lips pressed tightly together, and their thoughts weighed down by helplessness. For soldiers who were trained to fight and protect, being forced to merely watch was almost unbearable. Yet Major Draven, despite his earlier trembling, seemed to regain control over himself. His years on the battlefield, the scars on his face, and the loss of his eye were proof that he had endured worse storms. With a deep breath, he steadied himself and asked, "What are both of your ranks? I can sense the mana flowing within you, but I cannot clearly discern your level of strength. Tell me, what powers do you possess?" Ash glanced at Ray, only to find Ray staring back at him. Neither spoke for a moment. Then, almost at the same time, they turned their eyes away. Ash was the first to answer. "I am at the peak of expert rank." While he, Before Ash could finish, Ray's voice cut through, calm and firm. I am at early master rank. The revelation drew a new wave of shock from them. Wide eyes and stunned faces surrounded the two youths. Their reaction was not surprising. Hardly anyone outside their circles knew who Ash and Ray really were. Ray might have had some recognition as a rising talent, but not nearly enough for every person of the military to be familiar with him. The military, after all, was an institution that often isolated itself from outside matters, focusing solely on war and survival rather than keeping track of prodigies from academies. Of course, Ash did not say his actual rank, just what the academy evaluation has pointed at. It took some time before the officers could regain their composure. It was not every day one encountered two 15-year-old children standing at such a level. At that age, they should have been safe at home, studying, growing, perhaps even playing like normal youths. Yet here they were, about to step into a battlefield that could claim even veterans. When the shock finally settled, Ash raised the question that mattered most. Can you tell me what kind of monsters are there, and everything else you know? We need more information. He could feel Ray's eyes on him as he said that, but he chose to ignore that gaze. Major Draven, though still unsettled, carried himself with the weight of experience. His life had already been carved by battle, and while this news was disturbing, it was not enough to shatter him. Even so, there was a flicker of unease behind his steady tone. All the monsters are being held a few kilometers away within a space illusion artifact, he explained. The artifact spreads a mist across an entire region, trapping anyone who enters. Unless one is above the rank of legendary, once you step inside, you cannot come out. However, that very artifact has started showing signs of breaking apart. Does that mean there is a tyrant inside? Ray asked sharply, his eyes narrowing. A/N. Tyrant S. Lord A. Beasts Va monsters. Legendary S. Grandmaster A. Humans. Draven shook his head, though his hesitation was noticeable. We are not certain. The mana readings are unstable because the dungeon break only happened recently. But there is a strong possibility that the number of beast lords is unusually high. Otherwise, the scale of this situation does not add up. His expression darkened as he added in a low voice, or maybe. He stopped himself, unwilling to finish the thought. No one pressed him to. There are some things that, once spoken, become true. Time passed as Ash and Ray absorbed every detail the Major provided. Though incomplete, the information painted a dangerous picture. The military had barely managed to seal the dungeon break in time, which meant little was truly known about the creatures inside. What they did know was enough to make even seasoned soldiers wary. Night descended, and the pale moonlight spilled across the land like cold silver. Beneath its glow, Ash and Ray stood before the vast mist-covered region, where the illusion artifact hid countless beasts. Major Draven accompanied them to the edge, his single eye shifting anxiously from one boy to the other. Are you certain you will be fine? He asked, worry dripping from his voice. He looked at Ash, then at Ray, and then back again as though trying to memorize their faces. Yeah, Ray replied calmly, his voice steady. Ash only gave a firm nod, silent but resolute. In truth, Draven's worry grew heavier with each passing moment. Even after learning about the monsters, neither Ash nor Ray had discussed a single detail about how they would fight together. If anything, it felt as though there was a rift between them, something unspoken that kept them apart. Their silence toward each other hinted not at camaraderie but at restraint, like enemies forced to walk side by side. That silence only deepened Draven's unease. Then, without another word, he watched as both Ash and Ray stepped forward. Their figures entered the mist, blurring at the edges before dissolving completely into the haze. In a blink, they were gone. Do not die, kids. Meanwhile, as Ash and Ray were entering the mist to deal with the monsters, somewhere on an unknown island, the third exam had already begun. The students placed there were struggling desperately against the harshness of nature itself. In the middle of that isolated island, hidden deep within a dense forest, a boy sat crouched on the ground, rubbing sticks together with all the strength he could muster. His breath came out in heavy pants, sweat dripping down his face as smoke began to rise from the friction of the wood. His arms trembled from exhaustion, yet he did not stop. At last, a small flame flickered to life. His eyes widened and a bright smile stretched across his dirt-streaked face. But as he quickly leaned forward to feed the spark with dry twigs, a drop of sweat rolled off his chin and landed directly on the tiny flame, extinguishing it instantly. Luthen froze, his body stiff as disbelief washed over him. His disheveled black hair was tangled with leaves and dirt, and his once clean academy tracksuit was drenched in sweat, stained with mud, and clinging uncomfortably to his slender frame. His build, lean and almost feminine in appearance, hid the strength of someone who had awakened, though his current state hardly reflected it. Damn, he muttered, pulling at his hair in frustration. I was actually this close to getting the fire started. I could almost taste the food already. But of course my rotten luck has to step in right at the last second, like it always does, as if the universe has some personal grudge against me. Being from Class 1E and considered one of the weakest, Luthen had been assigned what was supposed to be a modest and easy task. Even so, it already felt like torture. His teammates had fared better in their assignments. Varric of Class 1A, whose affinity leaned heavily toward defense, had stayed behind to guard their makeshift resting place. His duty was to protect both Luthen and Alina. Alina, a healer from Class 1C, was with them as well. Considering how rare healers were, Luthen should have been relieved to have her on the team. If only there had not been those two final members. Luthen lay back on the ground, staring up at the night sky as the pale moonlight filtered through the branches above. His thoughts circled in frustration. Out of all possible possibilities, why did I have to get her? He was not thinking about an ex-girlfriend or any childhood crush, but rather Alicia Moonglow, the girl who had immediately taken the role of leader after they met. At the moment she was away, hunting small animals to serve as their dinner. I don't know what that devil will do if something happens to her. Would he end up lashing out and hitting me too? Just my luck. A shiver ran down his spine as the thought sank deeper. The devil of the academy. That was what people called Ash. The stories about his ruthlessness were whispered across the campus like a curse. And though they were only rumors, the possibility that they were true was enough to make Luthen's stomach churn. I've even heard he doesn't spare women, treating everyone the same. What kind of madman is that? Definitely a devil. After all, why would anyone disfigure the face of a beautiful girl? Girls are something gods made for men to admire, and beating them is nothing but a sin. A monster like that shouldn't even exist. Groaning, Luthen sat up once more and returned to rubbing the sticks together, though his shoulders sagged in defeat. It would be nice if we had at least one fire mage in this group, he grumbled under his breath. But no, we had to get stuck with a water mage. What good will he do? Curse my luck. The water mage he was referring to was Corrin, a student of Class 1D. At that moment, Corrin was away with Alicia, both searching for food. The exam had started in earnest, and every team had been teleported to different locations' islands, with 2 teams on one island. For Luthen's group, their arrival point had been right in the middle of the woods, surrounded by towering trees and endless shadows. Their task was simple on paper yet brutal in practice. Defeat another team within 7 days. No restrictions, no rules. They could use anything they had at their disposal, as long as they emerged victorious. Simple, yes, but also barbaric. And they were currently trying to move towards the edge of the island. Traveling through the forest could be dangerous, as there was no telling what kind of creature might lurk there. Monsters could appear without warning, and even the smallest threat, like venomous insects, could become a problem. That was why they decided the best course of action would be to reach the clear land of the island. It was safer there, and the ocean promised a reliable source of food. Fishes could be caught easily, and water was not a concern since they had a water mage with them. Injuries were also manageable, though caution was still necessary. Alina's healing abilities were only suited for minor wounds, as she was still not that skilled. As for shelter, that problem was already solved with Varric in the group. He could manipulate the earth and create sturdy, igloo-shaped structures for them to rest in, which gave them some sense of security. Right now, they were somewhere deep in the forest, moving toward the nearest stretch of ocean they could hear faintly in the distance. At that moment, Luthen finally succeeded in making a fire. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he carefully placed the spark onto a piece of oil-stained wood, which caught fire quickly. Alina, who had been quietly watching him from the start, smiled at his success. But when Luthen turned to look at her, she blushed lightly and shifted her gaze away. She was shy by nature, and her reactions often betrayed it. Luthen, still basking in the small delight of his achievement, suddenly heard footsteps approaching. His hearing was sharper than most, and he could tell two people were coming toward them, carrying something heavy. Looking to the side, he saw Alisha dressed in a dark tracksuit, followed by a boy with sky-blue hair and matching eyes. A playful grin stretched across his face. Between them, they carried the carcass of a four-legged creature. It had slender limbs, a graceful body, and horns that curved like polished wood, giving it the look of a deer. "Oh, looks like, at least I will be able to eat my fill tonight." Pushing himself up, he knew what awaited him next. The task of butchering the meat would naturally fall to him, as he was the only swordsman among them. Of course, there was Alisha as well, but I would rather die than let her do this work. If that devil finds out she was made to butcher a creature, who knows what he would do to me? So Luthen took the task upon himself. He carved up the fresh meat with practiced movements and set it over the fire to cook. Once the work was done, he sat down beside the others, who were already chatting among themselves. Just as he lowered himself onto the ground, he caught the tail end of their conversation. "We need to be careful." Luthen shifted slightly and asked, "Miss Alisha, careful of what exactly?" For a moment, everyone glanced at him before turning their eyes back to the fire in the middle, where the tender cuts of meat were roasting slowly, their aroma mixing with the forest air. "Of everything," Alisha answered calmly, her voice carrying a quiet weight. "This forest, this land, the sky above, even the ocean. We have to be careful of everything." "I see," Luthen replied softly. That was when Corran smirked and spoke in his usual teasing tone. "Seriously, miss? We're stuck on an island, not at some noble banquet. Why not add your majesty while you're at it, right, Alisha?" His remark drew a few chuckles from the group. "Shut up. I was just trying to show some respect," Luthen shot back, annoyed. Yeah, Corran replied casually, waving him off without a care. "Bastard." Luthen clenched his teeth but chose to remain silent after that. Instead, he sat back and listened as the conversation drifted from one topic to another, with Corran constantly throwing in comments that made the others laugh. It was not hard to notice what he was trying to do. His jokes, his lightheartedness, all of it was his way of getting closer to Alisha. The reason behind it, however, was something Luthen could not understand. "If the devil finds out, you will be dead." Eventually, the conversation shifted to something more serious. They began discussing the night watch and who would take turns guarding the camp. After a short discussion, the order was set. Alina would go first, then Varric, followed by Luthen, Corran, and finally Alisha. No one raised any objections, and with that settled, they gradually lay down to rest, waiting for the next day to arrive. The first day was quite normal, Alisha thought while looking at the night sky, which now carried a faint trace of brightness as the first hints of morning slowly arrived. The stars that had once burned clearly above her were beginning to fade, swallowed by the quiet light of dawn. "I am lucky I got a quite balanced team." It was indeed true. Alisha's team had a healer, a defender with solid endurance, a mage whose spells gave them ranged power, and a close-range fighter who was well-versed in almost every type of work. As for herself, she was a reliable damage dealer, striking directly at the souls of monsters and killing them instantly. In reality, forming a team like this by chance was not easy at all. It was something most students could only hope for, so perhaps luck had truly played a part in her case. But whether it was really luck or not, only time would tell. We don't even know who our opposing team. The Academy never revealed the opponents each team would be facing. It was done deliberately to add the element of surprise during their encounters. It was also meant to serve as a lesson, to remind them that in the real world, enemies would not always show themselves beforehand, nor would they allow time to prepare. Their task for this new day was simple in words, yet demanding in reality. They had to find the opposing team before the opposing team found them, and once they did, they had to eliminate them. There were many factors to consider, many things that could go wrong, yet above all else, the most important step was to locate the ones they had to fight against. Ash. Her lips unconsciously formed his name, a whisper slipping into the silence of dawn. She did not know what type of exam Ash was currently taking, and though she did not want to admit it aloud, she found herself missing him. Being with him had changed her in ways she could not ignore. Her personality had steadied after spending so much time at his side. Her emotions were no longer as unstable as before, and she wondered if it was because of him or because she was slowly learning to live with the twisted version of herself. Most of the time, she was able to keep her thoughts hidden and her actions under control. Yet when her desires spilled out, a single kiss was often enough to silence them. Still, deep inside, she feared that one day it would not be enough, that she might lose control entirely and allow those desires to push her into doing something extreme. And then there were his secrets. Sigh. Does he think he can fool me? Alicia shifted slightly on the makeshift chair, which was flat and clean, though still quite hard and uncomfortable. Varric had made it for her, but his skill had not yet reached the point where he could give proper softness to the objects he created. Her gaze drifted forward, fixed on nothing in particular, while her thoughts circled endlessly. I know. He is hiding something. After he found out that I can detect lies and read minds, he began cryptically phrasing his words. Whatever he says is true, but the details are always carefully hidden. The secrecy unsettled her. She was upset that he chose not to share those things with her, although she never showed it outwardly. Sometimes compromises like this were necessary in a relationship, even if they left behind a quiet ache. People often said that in a relationship there should not be any compromises at all, that a bond built on them was nothing but a fragile structure, destined to collapse sooner or later. But Alicia did not think that way. She believed that a relationship without any compromise was an empty husk. If two people in love refused to bend for each other, then what they shared was not love, but only lust. And lust was something that always faded with time, becoming weaker and weaker until finally there was nothing left at all. A true love is linked to the soul. You love the soul of the person, their everything, from their eyes to their smile, from their eyebrows to their fingers, from their dimples to their emotions, which can shift from anger to sadness, from jealousy to countless other feelings. But even then, you still love them. No amount of fights can truly separate them. No amount of distance can tear them apart. It is a bond bound by soul. A soulmate. There is a very beautiful example that shows how true love is built upon compromises. In her previous life, she had heard about it in Indian mythology and learned it with great admiration, and the memory of it often left her inspired. In Indian religion, there is proof of eternal love between Lord Krishna and Radhaji. Radhaji compromised her wish to live alongside Krishna in worldly life, choosing instead to love him through devotion and memory, keeping him alive in her heart even though marriage was not possible. Meanwhile, Lord Krishna compromised by suppressing his own longing, carrying Radha within his heart while still fulfilling his duties as king and divine preserver of the world. There is also the love between Lord Shiva and goddess Parvati. Parvati-ji compromised her comfort and her life of royalty, embracing harsh austerities and trials to prove her devotion and win Shiva's heart. Shiva, in turn, compromised his path of strict ascetic detachment, choosing to accept family life and worldly bonds through his love for Parvati-ji. Though in the first example, the love between Krishna and Radha does not reach marriage, it remains an example of something eternal and pure. She knew it was only an example, yet she could not help but think deeply about what it meant for her own feelings. She wanted her love to succeed. But if even gods could not always achieve their true love, then could a mortal like her truly do so? In this world, which was far more dangerous than her previous one, where countless beings more powerful than she could even imagine walked freely, could she really fulfill her wish? Could she really hope to spend a peaceful life with Ash? I will. I will make it succeed. Her thoughts burned with determination as the flames of obsession inside her heart rose higher, blazing fiercely as if they could consume the very heavens themselves. If even gods cannot make their love succeed, then I will simply have to become more powerful than gods. Even though she did not know what lay beyond the gods, she wanted to try. Whether she could truly reach that height, only time would tell. Only time would decide if her love would succeed or not, whether she would be granted a happy ending or left behind with nothing but despair. Step! While she was still lost in her thoughts, she heard the sharp crack of a wooden stick breaking underfoot. Turning her head slightly, she saw Corrin approaching. His blue hair caught faint light and shimmered softly, while his matching eyes seemed calm as he walked toward her, stretching his body as though he had just awakened from a long rest. And then, at the same time, a voice slipped into her mind. It felt like Corrin's voice, yet carried a subtle difference, faint and unspoken. Sigh. She is quite beautiful. Alicia heard it clearly, yet kept her expression unchanged. She was reading Corrin's mind. In fact, she could read the minds of everyone on her team. Even though most of them were of the same rank as her, they were weaker in strength, which allowed her to pierce through their thoughts. She had discovered that as long as someone was weaker than her, she could read their mind, even though the written description of her ability had claimed otherwise. Thus, she knew what everyone thought about her. She knew that Alina, even though she appeared shy, was somewhat jealous of her because of Ash. She knew that Varric, even though he appeared logical and serious, was actually soft inside, with a gentleness he tried to hide. She knew that Luthen was terrified of Ash, calling him a devil in his thoughts, and because of that, he avoided her as well. And she knew that Corrin, even though he acted sarcastically and was friendly, carried subtle feelings for her. Yet beneath those emotions there was something else, some secret carefully hidden, so well guarded that even she could not glimpse what it truly was. "Good morning," Corrin greeted, his lips curving into a warm smile. "Good morning," Alicia replied with a smile of her own before continuing softly. "Why are you up so early? You should rest a little longer. There is still time." Corrin rubbed the back of his head and let out a light laugh, his eyes drifting toward the faint brightness of dawn. "I am fine, to be honest. I rested enough. As if I wanted to sleep more. But I woke up just to see the sunrise with you. I would be quite nice if we had reached the beach. The view would have been even nicer." "I see," Alicia answered without the slightest change in her expression, though she had heard it all. Corrin kept watching the light of dawn, his gaze distant and heavy with thoughts. "Damn, my heart is beating so loudly. I think I finally understand why both Ash and Rey fought for her. She is so beautiful and nice. I don't stand a chance against them." Alicia's lips twitched faintly, yet she chose not to respond, continuing to look at the morning sunlight. Time slipped by quietly like that, until eventually she grew tired of his constant stream of silent praises for her beauty. Rising to her feet, she walked away from him, letting the distance cool the weight of his thoughts. By coincidence, she passed near the place where Alina was still resting, and her skill brushed against Alina's unguarded thoughts. "I wanted to wake up early and get fresh, but Corrin is already awake. It will be too awkward if I go in front of him. Damn it. I should have asked Alicia to wake me up. But I don't like talking to her." There was no hint of shyness in Alina's thoughts, only a trace of distress and hesitation that made her seem smaller than her usual self. "That is why I took the last shift to keep watch," Alicia thought, a faint smile curving her lips. Yet even with that smile, she felt a flicker of pity for Alina, and so she stepped forward, intending to help her escape from her small plight. Alicia's team left as soon as the first sunlight touched them, moving swiftly toward the shore. Along the way, they hunted a small creature and had their breakfast. It was not until the afternoon that they finally saw the ocean in all its glory. Covered in leaves and vines, with dirt stained all over the Academy's black tracksuit, Alicia and the others stood still for a moment, looking at the waves as they washed along the shore, creating a tranquil sound that carried into the air. Seabirds flew across the sky, their sharp cries breaking the rhythm of the waves. Standing in the shade of the vast forest behind them, all of them carried an expression of relief. Traversing the forest had not been easy, and their journey had been anything but peaceful. They encountered many monsters, but their strength was not enough to truly trouble the group. What weighed them down more than the enemies was the environment itself, which constantly fought against them. They were not well versed in fighting in a damp area crowded with trees that restricted their movements. Because of that, both Luthen and Alicia suffered minor injuries, though Alina healed them quickly without much trouble. After that encounter, they decided that whenever a battle broke out, they would cut down the trees around them to make fighting easier. It helped, but at the same time it left behind obvious traces of their passage. If the opposing team noticed those signs, it could turn into a serious problem for Alicia. She was aware of this, which was why she left behind some misleading trails along their path, scattering them deliberately to confuse anyone who might try to follow. The quiet moment was broken when the sound of someone dropping down heavily reached their ears. "We finally made it to the shore. Damn, that was one hell of a journey," Luthen muttered, the words escaping in a low breath, caught between a laugh and a groan as he leaned back, exhausted. Alicia was not using her mind reader skill now, since it drained her mana whenever she kept it active, and listening to the constant stream of thoughts from others was not pleasant. People were often very different from what they showed on the surface. Even though she knew this truth, knowing and experiencing were not the same. Knowledge was one thing, but experience brought it to life. You could be aware of many things, yet still never truly understand them until you lived through them yourself. "Rest for a while, then we will start moving," she instructed softly. After that, she stepped away from the group and sat on a stone a short distance away. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out a small object. It was a button, faintly glowing with green light. The Academy had given one to each team leader, its purpose being to ensure that both groups could eventually find each other instead of wandering endlessly around the island. The meaning of its glow was simple. If the button shone with a green light, it meant the opposing team's tracker was within range. However, they were never told how wide that range truly was. The other team could be closer than expected, or they could still be far away. If the teams moved in opposite directions, the glow would shift to red. "Looks like we have finally entered the range of the other tracker." Until now, the button had remained dark, which meant they had been moving in the correct direction but were simply too far for detection. As she was thinking, she caught the sound of footsteps approaching. Quickly slipping the button back into her pocket, she turned her head toward the sound. It was Corrin. "I suppose that means we are finally close to the other team?" he asked, his tone steady but curious, as his eyes lingered on Alicia, already noticing what she had been holding a moment before. Alicia gave a small nod in response. "So," Corrin continued, a grin spreading slowly across his face, "do you already have a plan for what to do next? Because if not, I have a crazy idea, and it just might work." Alicia raised her eyebrow and asked, "Oh, tell me. I will decide what to do after hearing it." At the same time, she quietly activated her mind reader skill, letting his thoughts flow into her mind. "It's simple. We can use the tracker button as a mislead since it does not show the exact location. It could confuse the opponent if we just split into two teams. By doing that, we could bait the opponent into approaching the tracker carrier, and then we can ambush them." Corrin suggested the idea in a tone filled with confidence, as if he could already see the victory unfolding before his eyes. His thoughts mirrored his words, firmly revolving around the same idea. "I have also thought about that," Alicia replied calmly. "But the enemy could do the same, and that would place everything back to square one." Hearing her words, Corrin went into deep thought, his brows knitting slightly as he considered the flaw. "Right, that thing is also possible. How about if we leave the tracker on some small animal? That could solve the problem. This way, we could set up an ambush not only for the tracker carrier but also for the opponent who tries to ambush us." Alicia shook her head lightly and said, "No, that plan is based solely on the chance that the opponent will eventually find our team. What if we stop searching and they never come across us? If that happens, Both teams will fail the exam. Damn. Why is she such an overthinker? She should just think positively for once. That thought made Alicia's eyes twitch. Overthinker? Me? I am simply considering the probabilities. Then again, that really does sound like overthinking. But we have to do something, don't we? The possibilities you are speaking of are still only possibilities. We can prepare a backup plan in case something unexpected happens, Corin argued, his voice carrying a hint of stubbornness. Alicia paused for a moment before smiling faintly. Well, why not? I was already planning to bait the opposing team, so we can simply add your idea to mine and make an even better plan. Oh, so she does have a plan. Nice. But let's discuss it with everyone else, Alicia said as she stood up, her tone turning more decisive, and walked toward the others. Corin followed right after, though his expression clearly betrayed the feeling of disappointment, like someone who had just been robbed of their favorite dish. Sigh. It was a perfect chance to spend some time alone. Alicia caught that stray thought but quietly deactivated her skill. It was not as if she could comment on it, since those were only his inner feelings, and she had no right to interfere. When they rejoined the others, Alicia explained their combined idea in detail, and together the group discussed the strategies they could use. They worked out different movements and fallback options, preparing several plans to cover possible scenarios. Once everything was agreed upon, the team began following their chosen strategy with renewed focus. The first problem they faced was to find a suitable animal to tie the tracker onto. In fact, they already knew the perfect candidate for that role. As their gazes turned toward the forest they had just come from, the answer was waiting there. Corin and Varric, you two will find the Grasswhisker and tie the tracker to it, while Alina and I will create more misleading traces of our presence. As for Luthen, you will set traps throughout this entire region. Grasswhisker was one beast that they encountered while moving, though they were not able to kill it as it ran away. They are good at movement and running away. Is that clear? Alicia asked, her voice calm yet carrying a weight that pressed on the group. Luthen hesitated, then raised his hand. Miss Alicia, what if the fight we are supposed to have does not happen in this area? Won't my efforts to make won't all our efforts be wasted? Alicia slowly nodded, as though she had already expected that concern, and replied, that is why we will wait. We will test their patience. They know as well as we do that they will be expelled if they fail to find the opposing team and engage in battle. Her tone grew firmer as she continued. That pressure will weigh on them, and eventually they will attack. It does not matter whether it happens on the last day or just 1 hour before the exam ends. What matters is that we will be the ones choosing the ground and the moment. Do you understand? Everyone froze at her cold reasoning. Their faces paled, and silence stretched between them until Varric finally spoke, his voice trembling slightly. But what if they never attack us? By tying the tracker to an animal, we are making them believe we are anywhere else. What if they cannot find us at all? Won't we be expelled as well? For that, Alicia replied evenly. Once our preparations here are complete, one of you will follow the Grasswhisker from a distance. If the enemy encounters the animal first, then all the better because we can ambush them there. Her gaze swept across each of them, sharp yet calm. The only thing we must decide is how that person will send us the signal. Silence settled once more, broken only by the cries of seabirds circling above them. Their shrill calls echoed across the sky, making the stillness of the group feel even heavier. Luthen finally spoke, his voice shaking slightly as though he already knew the answer. And who will be that person? Alicia's lips curved into a wide smile, and instead of replying, she asked, what do you think? Damn! Why always me? Why is my luck the worst? And just like that, the team scattered to carry out their tasks. Luthen worked with a scowl on his face and curses in his mind, though his hands moved with reluctant precision as he set about his job. As soon as Ash entered the mist, it felt as though he had stepped into another dimension entirely. The mist wasn't just fog. It drifted and clung like a strange smoke, wrapping around him as he moved forward. His vision was swallowed by the haze, and after a while, even sound seemed to dissolve, leaving behind nothing but silence and the faint echo of his own breathing. Yet Ash pressed onward. When he looked to the side, Ray had vanished from sight. Ash did not panic because this was exactly why the artifact used by the military was so insidious. One could enter but not leave, and the moment someone stepped inside, they would be separated from the rest. Communication was impossible, and that was why the Major had been so worried about Ash and Ray, since neither of them planned anything together. Nor did they talk. He will be fine. Like a tyrant could ever break his defense skill. Ash knew that unless an Overlord-class monster appeared, Ray would be safe. Even if he had trouble damaging a monster that had a domain, his survival was not in question. He would not die, and Ash was no different. Alone, he could not fare much better against such creatures, but if he and Ray ever joined forces, they might, maybe possibly theoretically, bring down even a tyrant. After walking for some time, he felt the air around him shift. The mist slowly began to clear, though it did not vanish completely. It remained, but thin enough to grant him a wider view. Looks like I have completely entered the zone where the monsters are. He raised his hand and summoned Eclipse. The white gem appeared, its mirror-like surface gleaming faintly even in the mist, a rainbow-hued thread swaying at the pommel. Ash had no strategy to follow. There was no grand plan waiting to be executed. His task was simple, to kill everything that moved inside this cage until nothing remained. Looks like it will finally be time to test my training. Of course, he did not expect to see overwhelming results right away, but he would at least feel the difference in the way he moved, the way his blade struck. When the fog ahead shifted, the pale mist was replaced by a murky swirl of purple and green. The poisonous fog. Looks like I am about to enter their territory. The creatures that lurked here were vile, twisted beasts that thrived in poison and madness. As Ash stepped inside, he immediately felt the poisonous fog forcing its way into his body. It rushed through his veins like a flood of venom, reaching his heart and organs, making them falter and collapse, only to heal back a second later. Some organs simply died only to be forcefully revived. Heat and acid spread inside him, each breath prickling his lungs, irritating and burning him from within. But Ash had faced worse before, so he steadied himself and continued to walk deeper into the haze. Without warning, something lunged at him from the side. Ash reacted instantly, stepping back with practiced ease. His sword flashed upward in a clean arc, cutting through the creature without resistance. Green acidic blood sprayed across his academy tracksuit, leaving faint burns but failing to destroy the fabric. The material was reinforced, designed to protect the students in combat. Ash flicked his wrist, sending the blood flying off Eclipse's blade, then looked at the clean surface of the sword and thought, that was cool. I should definitely do it often. His eyes shifted to the corpse at his feet. The creature was hideous, almost grotesque. It had 4 legs covered in brown and black fur, 2 long upward curved tusks, and a second set of fang-like teeth jutting down like a predator's. Its nose resembled that of a pig, a grotesque snout designed to release the poisonous fog around them. A single small horn jutted out from its forehead, and its eyes glowed a crazed red. Its body was about twice the size of a dog. Ash tilted his head. A poisonous dog, he muttered. That was what he decided to call it. The beast was unknown, never recorded before, which meant there was no information available. It was a savage beast. Looks like the military was mistaken about the number of monsters inside. They had been told that only rank A, B, and C monsters would appear here. Yet Ash had just slain a rank D monster. What did that mean? Was the military wrong? Or maybe a dungeon break happened after the artifact was activated. If that was the case, then the situation was even more serious than expected. But Ash's expression remained calm. His long white hair was tied neatly behind him, his piercing azure eyes unwavering, and the black tracksuit gave him a relaxed, almost unbothered appearance as he walked, patiently waiting for the next attack. It doesn't matter if the number of monsters increases. I will just have to kill them all. And it's not like I can die. With a faint chuckle, he quickened his pace. The silence was broken in moments as 4 more poisonous dogs lunged from the fog. Ash's body sparked with lightning. His movements blurred as he flashed forward, his sword striking with blinding speed. Another 4 beasts fell, cut apart in an instant. He was still relying only on his sword, holding back from using spells. He knew that one real battle, one true clash for survival, was worth more than countless hours of practice. A fight for life carved instincts into the body, far sharper than repetition ever could. And Ash intended to temper his sword here, to sharpen it until he touched the first stage of weapon mastery. He was close. If he gave his all, if he relied on his experience, his instincts, and the teachings Leonard had left him, then this battlefield could be the place where he broke through. Possibly. I set the traps all around the place, even in the forest, on the ground, across the sand, and even on that large cliff over there. Luthen spoke while stretching his sore shoulders. His words were directed at Alina, who sat quietly on a rock, watching the ocean waves crash against the shore. The sun was sinking into the horizon, painting the evening sky in shades of orange and purple. It had taken them nearly 6 hours to finish all the preparations, and the exhaustion showed on his face. Alina lowered her gaze, her voice trembling as she stammered, I see. Alicia is there. She pointed towards the distance, where Alicia stood with Corrin and Varric. The 2 boys were holding down a small, green, cat-like beast, while Alicia carefully tied the tracker to its body. Luthen followed her gesture, then glanced back at Alina. He sighed and said, All right, but you should really try to socialize more. Otherwise, it will create problems for you in the future. Without waiting for her reply, he turned and walked toward Alicia and the others. Behind him, Alina bit her lip, her thoughts whispering bitterly, It's easy for you to say, you don't understand a thing. As Luthen reached the group, he frowned at the sight of the restless creature and asked, How do you expect me to follow it? That thing is so damn fast. I don't think I can keep up with it. Not when I'm already this tired. Honestly, I don't think I'll last long running after it. Varric gave a reassuring nod. Don't worry. This one's injured, so its speed has dropped. You won't have much trouble keeping up. As for your fatigue, get plenty of rest tonight, because you'll have to leave in the morning. Hearing that, Luthen let out a long breath of relief. At least they have the sense to let me rest. But his relief was short-lived. After all, you won't get any rest once tomorrow starts. So, make the most of tonight. Corrin's teasing voice cut in, and Luthen's eye twitched in annoyance. This bastard. He's always like this. Just let me. Before he could snap back, Alicia spoke with her calm tone. It's fine. Don't mind Corrin. You should rest well. In fact, you don't need to do any night watch today. We cannot predict how tomorrow will turn out, and I want you at your best. I trust you to handle this task, because your role is an important one. Luthen straightened at her words, his earlier irritation fading. Yet a question weighed on his mind, and after a pause, he asked seriously, Miss Alicia, can you tell me why you gave me this task? There are stronger people in the team, like Corrin or Varric. They could handle it better than me, so why me? It was a question born out of genuine confusion. The responsibility was heavy, and he couldn't understand why it had fallen on him, the second weakest in the group. Alicia's crimson eyes softened as she smiled faintly. Because you always get the work done. Huh? Luthen thought in a dazed expression. You complete every task I assign you, even if it doesn't suit you. You may not excel in one thing, but you are capable of adapting to many. In short, you're a jack of all trades, and that is exactly what we need for this role. That is why I chose you. Does that answer your question? Luthen felt his cheeks warm at her words, and for the first time, he found himself flustered by unexpected praise.
Yeah.
It does. Tisk. Corrin clicked his tongue, clearly displeased. After discussing some other details, everyone was dismissed. Crash! As another beast fell to the ground, Ash tilted his head, his senses flaring, and at the same moment, A claw swept past his head, the sharp wind brushing against his cheek. Without any hesitation, he swung Eclipse. The blade cut through the poisonous dog as if the beast offered no resistance at all, splitting it cleanly in two. But that was not the end. As 4 more beasts lunged towards him from the front while another 5 closed the distance from behind, their eyes glinting with hunger. This is the largest group I have encountered till now. Until now, he had faced close to 50 D-rank poisonous beasts, all of which had fallen without much effort, but never had he come across a pack of 11 poisonous dogs at the same time. If Ash wished, he could have obliterated them instantly with a spell, turning the pack into nothing more than scattered remains. But that was not what he wanted. Doing so would defeat the very purpose of being here. It is such a perfect moment to let me practice my sword. Even though he carried the class of a magic swordsman, he knew he was not living up to it. As he went deeper into this cursed place, the number of beasts would only keep increasing, and at one point, spells would become unavoidable. That was why, while he was still only at the periphery of the area, he decided to dedicate this chance solely to the sword. Ash adjusted his stance and steadied his breathing as he watched the movements of the beasts. One lunged for his legs, another went straight for his head, while the 2 on either side released thick streams of poisonous fog from their pig-like noses, leaping in unison to trap him. All of this happened in a single instant, the air itself turning foul as his vision became drowned in shades of green and purple. The poison seeped into his body and burned against his skin, yet Ash did not waver. Instead of rushing forward, he shifted his weight and stepped back with nimble precision. His movement caused the 2 beasts from the sides to crash past each other, their claws raking only empty space before they turned back, eyes wild with madness. The other 2 missed their mark as well, but they, too, quickly refocused on him, baring their fangs. Then suddenly, Ash enhanced his legs with a surge of mana, his body bursting forward with twice the speed of his retreat. The mindless beasts did not react in time and only moved with even greater ferocity. But just as they lunged again, Ash shifted diagonally, his blade already swinging. The rightmost beast tried to spew poison across his path, its jaw snapping to bite down on Eclipse, but the sword flared with a strange energy that cleaved through the fog and the beast itself in a single stroke. Without losing momentum, Ash carried the swing into a wide arc, striking down another dog that had leapt too close, splitting its body open as blood sprayed into the poisonous haze. With 2 beasts already dead, Ash did not slow down. He lunged at the remaining 2 that were less than a meter away, Eclipse sparking with streaks of lightning as his blade cut through both in one swift motion, their bodies falling lifelessly before they even touched the ground. Nice! It took him another minute to dispatch the remaining 5, who had already closed in dangerously. Their claws slashed wildly, their bodies lunging with mindless hunger, but one after another, they fell before his steady advance. When the last beast finally dropped, Ash lowered his sword and exhaled slowly. That makes 60 kills, approximately. I did not count the first few, so it might be a little less or perhaps more. He muttered softly, his voice calm yet carrying a faint note of exhaustion, as his eyes swept over the field behind him. All that remained was a landscape of torn carcasses, the ground soaked in blood and poison, a scene that looked nothing short of a set taken straight from a zombie movie. Meanwhile, Ash, whose whole body was in peak condition, had only burns scattered across his tracksuit, yet not a single mark touched his skin. Even his hair and face remained spotless, without a trace of the acidic blood that splattered all around him. He had barely drawn on his true strength, nor had he relied on the overwhelming power of his body. If he did, then all this practice would lose its meaning. But I didn't expect the immunity skill to grow here. The poisonous fog continued seeping into him, spreading heat and irritation through his insides, burning him from within. Yet at the same time, his skill, 100 poisonous immunity, was steadily refining itself, becoming sharper and stronger, perhaps even preparing to evolve into something greater. The skill was of no real value, to be honest. Almost all the work was being carried out by the Rune of Life. The immunity skill itself was nothing more than words, a hollow title with little purpose. Even if it evolved, the only change would be that he would stop feeling anything as the poison seeped into his body. In simple terms, his body would merely adapt to it. Let's speed things up. No more holding back. Otherwise, Ray will get ahead of me. After killing 60 beasts, Ash came to understand that there was nothing left to gain from restraining his strength any further. Holding back had only slowed him down, and it was not teaching him anything new. Growth would only come if he placed himself in an unfair situation, one where the battle pushed him to the edge and forced him to rise above it. That kind of struggle could only be found against stronger enemies, which meant he had to reach the center as quickly as possible. Yet a quiet fear stirred in the back of his mind. If he was too slow, then Ray might take away the chance to face those stronger enemies first, robbing him of the experience he desperately needed. When Ash finally stopped restraining himself, his movements changed completely. Passing through the fog like a breeze, he unleashed the power of his affinities. Lightning crackled, life energy surged, and even space bent faintly as his sword cut through every beast in his path. Savage monsters fell like fragile insects. Death affinity had yet to fully manifest, but there was progress. Soon, he would be able to wield it as naturally as life itself. Though for that, he would need far more knowledge and the right books. Another challenge waiting ahead. As his pace quickened, so did his tally. From a modest 60, his kills soared to 200 within 15 minutes, and the number only kept rising. Meanwhile, deeper inside the choking fog, another boy of the same age was cutting through the monsters with even greater ease. He moved as though he were taking a casual stroll. Not once did he bother blocking claws or fangs. Every beast that rushed at him was sliced cleanly in half, as though a sword had taken the form of a human and was walking forward. At that moment, Ray's attention wasn't even on the beasts. His eyes lingered on the glowing quest window, which demanded he clear out all monsters in the area, with no time limit. Is the system actually happy or something? Or is it a scheme? Ray thought idly as Etheris cut down another savage beast. It was his 300th kill. He wasn't counting, but someone else was. Damn, they smell horrible. Keep them away from me. Ugh, that was the 300th already. Use another sword. I'll allow it. Brat! You're making too much noise. And it's not like you have a nose, nor can you smell anything. You are just irritating me, nothing else. Easy for you to say. Try being in my place. It feels disgusting getting soaked in their blood. I would rather get soaked in someone else's blood. And I have no idea how you're enduring it. That's because the Academy tracksuit has a smell diffusion system. I'm not breathing it in directly. The stench is still there, but it's diluted for me, so it's bearable. TCH. Unfair. Ray chuckled softly. There's nothing I can do about it. You're the only sword I have. The others break the moment I try using them seriously. Oh. Etheris stayed silent for a moment before its voice returned, calm but firm. I don't think your system is happy. I think it simply believes you're strong enough to handle the weight of all your affinities. That's why it is granting such a reward. If you put it like that, it does make sense. Unlocking all the remaining affinities if I succeed here, that was beyond what I expected. I had thought it would take me a long time before I could awaken them. Ray's form blurred, becoming illusory as several beasts lunged at his previous spot. A breath later, he appeared behind them like a reaper in the fog, and with one swing, their lives were reaped. Exactly. But that also means your training will need to become even harsher. Otherwise, those affinities will weigh you down as a burden instead of lifting you as a strength. Yeah, I know. Ray was even a little suspicious about the intentions of the system. After the scene with Ash, that doubt grew faintly in the back of his mind. Not too much, but enough to make him wonder. Why did the system help him? Why was he chosen in the first place? What exactly did it want from him? Unknowingly, a seed of doubt had been planted deep within his heart. Yet still, there was nothing he could do about it. The only choice was to keep moving forward and wait for the time to come when the truth would finally reveal itself.